Chapter 641, Special Instructor. Professor Wilson's presentation today was really impressive. I wonder when we can be like him. Seamus Finnegan exclaimed excitedly, bouncing on his bed after returning to the dormitory he shared with Harry. But the professor also mentioned that to upgrade our spells, we need to increase our intelligence. How am I supposed to improve with just 1 star in intelligence? Ron said, looking a bit downcast as he stared at the lonely on his screen. You're still better off than me. My intelligence is only half a star, Neville admitted, scratching his head in embarrassment. He then turned to Harry. Harry's talent is better. His initial intelligence is boss. You'll definitely learn spells faster than us. Yeah, Harry, why is your intelligence so high? It's even better than George and Fred's, and they only have Poff, Ron said, rolling over on his bed to look at Harry. I don't really know, Harry replied, shaking his head in confusion. But my other attributes are pretty low, and my mana value doesn't even reach 90. Why are all of yours over 100? Didn't you hear what the professor said? Ron pointed to the screen. Magic power is also related to physical fitness. We've been eating snacks since we were young, and Neville often had meals at Uncle Wilson's house. I heard they usually eat the meat of magical animals, which is much more nutritious than regular food. I remember Uncle Wilson often delivered meat to the Weasley's family, too. You must have eaten a lot, Neville said, sinking his head into his pillow. We did, but we have a big family, Ron shrugged helplessly. So we only get to have a good meal during the holidays. Now that you mention it, I'm starting to miss the taste of dragon meat sausage. As his friends unknowingly shifted the topic to food, Harry couldn't help but feel envious. He had lived with his aunt's family since he was a child and usually only had enough to fill his stomach. Let's not talk about it anymore. We should go to bed early. We have classes tomorrow, charms in the morning, tactical training in the afternoon, and we have to get up for morning exercises, Neville said, already half asleep. Under the guidance of his grandmother and Anduin, he had developed very disciplined living habits. Ugh, don't remind me about those morning exercises. I almost forgot, Ron groaned, turning over and covering his head with a pillow. Tactical training. I wonder what the professor will teach us in the first class, Harry muttered before slowly closing his eyes. Early the next morning, all the students were running through the corridors, rushing to the vestibule to avoid being late. Fortunately, today's start time was half an hour later than the previous night, sparing them some suffering. However, they still couldn't afford to be late. When everyone arrived at the courtyard and lined up according to yesterday's formation, they were surprised to see Hogg standing at the top of the steps instead of Anduin. Hogg was wearing a set of training clothes similar to everyone else's, with a whistle hanging around his neck. He looked down at them arrogantly. Hurry up, everyone. Do you still want to have breakfast? Get in line. Hogg barked, pacing back and forth on the steps. Why is this guy here? Where's Professor Wilson? Wasn't he supposed to lead the morning exercises? George shouted angrily, and the others looked at the steps in confusion. Unlike Anduin, everyone was familiar with Hogg, having bought a blind box or two from him during the summer vacation. So, they weren't as nervous facing him as they had been with Anduin. Hey! Hogg grinned and, since you asked the question sincerely, Mr. Hogg will mercifully tell you, Hogg said. I will be your morning exercise instructor, and I will be in charge of everyone's morning exercises from now on. So you better be careful. I am not as kind as Professor Wilson. You better not make yourself uncomfortable with me. What? You came to take us to exercise in the morning? Why is our instructor a dog? Flitwick, Kay muttered, speechless. The two brothers were already annoyed at the sight of Hogg, and now they had to exercise under his watchful eye every morning. Who could stand it? How dare you insult the instructor? 5 points will be deducted from Gryffindor. Hogg stretched out his paw and pointed at Fred with a wicked smile. The silver amulet around his neck suddenly lit up, recording the deduction. What the hell? I didn't insult him. He's a dog. Fred whispered to George, looking incredulous. It's over. We're going to have a hard time. This dog is a dog. The most disgusting thing is that he really is a dog. It doesn't seem to work at all if we scold him like this. George complained in a low voice. Hogg, still standing on the steps with a smug look, said, "Don't think I can't hear what you're muttering down there. Be honest with me. My patience is limited. Hurry up and get in formation." Under Hogg's cursing and urging, the students in the courtyard reluctantly arranged themselves. Fortunately, the prefects seemed to have been informed of Hogg's appointment in advance and worked hard to maintain order. Beep! Hogg blew his whistle loudly after glancing at the neat formation. The piercing sound made everyone's scalp tingle, but it also woke them up instantly. Okay, the morning exercise is now officially started. First, a 5-minute warm-up exercise. Everyone follow me, Hogg shouted, then stood up in an anthropomorphic manner. The first movement is jumping jacks, 30 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Seeing Hogg leading the exercise like a dog, everyone could only move their bodies powerlessly. What was this? Why was this year's Hogwarts so weird, having to exercise with a dog on the second day of school? In the next 5 minutes, the more than 800 students watched in disbelief as Hogg led them through 5 warm-up exercises. From raising heart rates to stretching, everything was covered. No one expected a dog to be so flexible. Not only were Hogg's movements fast and precise, but he also had the skill to scold people during the exercise. If anyone's movements were slow or not up to standard, they would inevitably be scolded by Hogg. And the scolding was harsh, with Hogg threatening to deduct points from anyone who wanted to retaliate. Hogg's arrogance made everyone angry. Beep! After completing the warm-up, Hogg blew his whistle again. Okay, the warm-up is over. Next is a long-distance run, a quick round trip to the ringstone pile on the west side of Hogwarts Castle. Right now, we will form 4 queues based on houses and grades. The 7th graders will go first, led by the prefects. You should be familiar with the route. Hogg whistled again, urging everyone to leave. The 7th graders from the 4 houses took the lead, forming 4 queues. After they ran out along the viaduct next to the courtyard, the 6th graders followed, and soon the entire school formed a long stream of people. Everyone had to pass the 2 towers along the elevated stone bridge, go around the central courtyard to the outside of the castle, and then run along the road in the direction of the Forbidden Forest. This journey was at least 3 kilometers. Running back and forth is not an easy task for these young wizards. After ensuring everyone was following, Hogg got up and led the way, continuously explaining the essentials of running. Don't talk casually while running. Take 2 steps, then inhale, 2 steps, then exhale. Pay attention to deep breathing to ensure the air fully enters your lungs. Hogg then ran to the front of the group again. Don't run too fast. The younger students won't be able to keep up. Slow down your pace and focus on your breathing rhythm. The purpose of morning exercises is to teach you how to breathe properly. After giving instructions, he ran to the front and shouted slogans to keep everyone motivated. 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, beep, 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 beep. Hogg is such a noisy bastard. Why does he always blow that annoying whistle? No matter how far away he is, it feels like it's right in our ears. I bet that thing is some kind of alchemical whistle. George panted as he ran with the team, not forgetting to complain about his brother. Say less, George. My lungs are hurting. But seriously, why is Hogg so strong? Doesn't he get tired from running back and forth all the time? Fred's lips were pale as he ran, puzzled by Hogg's seemingly endless energy. Are you two talking bad about me again? Is this short distance too much for you? How about staying behind and running 2 more laps? Hogg suddenly appeared beside them, glaring with an unkind expression. No, we wouldn't dare, Mr. Hogg. Please, let us go. George was genuinely afraid of Hogg now. He couldn't fight Fred, and he couldn't win an argument with Hogg, who could deduct points from them at any time. So, he immediately confessed. You two are smart. Remember not to slack off in front of me. Mr. Hogg will always be watching you. Hogg anthropomorphically stretched out 2 dog paws to his eyes and then pointed at the twins. End of this chapter. Chapter 642. Lesson, Seeking a Monthly Recommendation Ticket. After warning the twins, Hogg looked back thoughtfully at the end of the line. The first graders were running very hard, especially Harry, a thin child. With Neville's help, he could barely keep up. Harry, hold on a little longer. The ringstone pile is almost here. Pay attention to maintaining a good breathing rhythm, Neville softly encouraged Harry beside him. Neville had received Anduin's training for a period before entering school, so the pressure was not too great for him. However, Harry looked like he was about to collapse, sweating continuously. Harry didn't dare to say anything, fearing it would discourage him. He hadn't exercised much since he was a child, and it was really difficult to adapt to such intense training all of a sudden. Do you need someone to help you run this far? It seems that our savior is nothing more than that. Just as the two were barely moving forward, a strange voice suddenly sounded from the side. Harry turned his head and saw that it was Draco Malfoy in the Slytherin queue. Draco was also running very hard. He was usually a pampered young master and had never experienced this kind of training, but because of his good physique, he could barely persist. What's the matter with you? Didn't you take out a mirror to look at yourself? Your face is so white, it's about to ooze powder. Ron, who was standing behind Harry, gave Draco a hard look. That's better than a guy who needs help, Malfoy retorted, but then he couldn't breathe because he talked too much, so he quickly shut up and focused on the exercise. Hearing Draco's ridicule, Harry felt uncomfortable. He gritted his teeth and broke away from Neville's support. Thank you, Neville. I'll run the rest of the way by myself. After saying that, Harry forced himself to move forward alone, which made Neville look at him helplessly. Shh, now I know I'm trying to be brave. Draco, who was not far away, curled his lips in embarrassment when he saw this. He didn't expect Harry to be so stubborn. In fact, when Draco first found out that Harry was running very hard, he just wanted to make a joke. But being pampered had bred arrogance in him, and he couldn't communicate with others calmly, so his words came off as domineering. But after getting Harry's attention, Draco didn't care about the effect. He just liked to show his presence in front of others. I can't tell that Harry is still a tough brat. Hog, who saw the scene behind the team, smiled inwardly. With a lot of exercise, these brats may not be able to hold on. With an idea in mind, Hog rushed to the front of the team at a faster speed. Once the large group reached the circular stone pile, he shouted loudly, "Grades 4, 5, 6, and 7, keep this speed and go around the circular stone pile. Run back to the vestibule the same way, and then everyone can disband. As for students under grade 4, let's stop here. You don't need to run on the way back. You are allowed to walk back slowly, but remember to set aside time to change clothes and eat breakfast. You must ensure that your body is dry." After hearing Hog's words, the queue suddenly became polarized. The wizards above the 3rd grade were crying and complaining, while the students in the lower grades were instantly relieved. They either fell to the ground, gasping, or leaned against the stone pile to rest. "Don't lie down!" Hog was furious when he saw the actions of these little wizards. "You must keep standing after running, otherwise it will be dangerous." After finishing speaking, Hog rushed into the crowd with a whistle in his mouth, beeping at them until they all got up from the noise. This Hog, the morning exercise is over, and he still can't let people rest. Ron leaned weakly against a broken wall and couldn't help cursing and complaining. "However, what Hog said is indeed true," Neville remarked, still in good spirits despite the layer of sweat covering his body. "Lying flat or squatting after exercising isn't good for muscle relaxation. Uncle Wilson used to reprimand me if he saw me lying down when I was tired." All right, Ron said, stretching comfortably. "At least our morning exercise is finally over, but the thought of doing this every day is a headache. Don't be so pessimistic. You can get used to it after running for a week," Neville shared his experience. He then looked at the drenched Harry beside him. "How are you holding up?" "It's okay. I'm very tired, but I feel good after sweating," Harry replied, taking a deep breath before nodding. Suddenly, he pointed towards the south side of the circular stone pile in surprise. "Look, what is that?" Everyone followed Harry's gaze and immediately noticed a rather large playground. There was a lot of equipment standing on it. Near the ring stone pile, there was an open area with floating targets, resembling a shooting range in the Muggle world. Additionally, there was a long runway with various obstacles, including mud puddles, barbed wire, and low walls. In the distance, several buildings of unknown purpose stood. "Isn't this the venue for our tactical training course?" Hermione exclaimed, her eyes wide with surprise. The afternoon course seems to be next to the ringstone pile. It's over. I'm almost desperate for tactical training now. Ron covered his face in despair. These pieces of equipment look terrifying. But didn't the professor say that to improve our attributes, especially intelligence, we have to rely on the training methods of tactical training? Harry, despite his initial resistance, was eager to improve his attributes. Everyone, worried about the upcoming tactical training, slowly made their way back to the castle from the ringstone pile. Perhaps due to the exercise, everyone's appetite was surprisingly good during breakfast. Even Harry felt his appetite had more than doubled. However, the aftermath of the morning practice became evident during the morning classes. Both senior and junior wizards seemed listless and had difficulty concentrating. The professors, having been notified by Anduin in advance, didn't take it to heart. They slowed down the teaching process, stretching what would normally be half a class into a full one. In the afternoon, despite their reluctance, everyone dragged their heavy steps back to the playground south of the ringstone pile. So, the three of you didn't even bring your textbooks to class? Hermione, who had arrived at the playground ahead of everyone, couldn't help but complain as she looked at Harry, Ron, and Neville, who were empty-handed. Don't you see these scary things around? Ron pointed to a 6 or 7 meter high apparatus with 2 hemp ropes hanging from it. That doesn't mean we don't need textbooks for today's class. Tactical training isn't all practical, Hermione retorted, rolling her eyes. Rebuked, Harry and the others scratched their heads in embarrassment. In their minds, Anduin's class was almost like a physical education class. The first 2 days of school had been either physical examinations or running. If they didn't know they were at Hogwarts, they probably wouldn't have even bothered to bring their wands. The freshmen, arriving one after another, looked at the equipment on the playground with trepidation. Those who were more courageous would even reach out and touch them. As class time approached, everyone saw a familiar figure rushing out from the side. "Why is it you again, Hog? Do you even teach the tactical training class?" Ron looked at the familiar dog in front of him with an annoyed expression. "What is Anduin going to do? Why are you here? Aren't you supposed to be in class? What are you thinking? I haven't even started talking yet. Why are you so nervous?" Hog walked in front of the crowd and gave Ron a blank look. "The freshmen's courses are not in this area. Come with me." After speaking, Hog twisted his buttocks and led the crowd towards Hagrid's cabin. The playground built by Anduin occupied a vast area. What Harry and the others saw was only the outermost part. There were actually many enclosed buildings, but everyone had assumed they would be taught here. Seeing this, Hermione couldn't help but give Harry and the others a look, silently scolding them for not bringing their textbooks. The crowd followed Hog for a 1-minute walk and entered a building with a small footprint, resembling a small factory. As soon as they stepped inside, everyone felt a blur before their eyes. A huge indoor square appeared in their field of vision. The furnishings were similar to a playground, but the style was very different from the harsh obstacle playground outside. It was more like an indoor gymnastics room, very tidy. "Look, Ron, there's a swimming pool," Harry shouted, pointing to the side. Everyone, including Ron, looked around and found that there was indeed a standard-sized swimming pool not far away, complete with a high diving platform. After careful observation, they found that the entire venue was divided into 4 large areas. One area was the swimming pool. Another area looked like a martial arts school, surrounded by a large number of rattan swords and sticks. In another section, there was a large shelf with dozens or hundreds of sandbags swinging back and forth. These sandbags were placed so densely that they even bumped into each other. The last area was the indoor gymnastics room they had first seen upon entering. Anduin stood in the middle of the gymnastics room, waiting for everyone with a smile. Chapter 43, Destructive Spiritual Compensation. "Just find a place to sit when you come in. Make yourselves comfortable," Anduin said, gesturing to the neat surroundings. He then sat down on a wooden bench, his previous seriousness replaced by a more relaxed demeanor. Anduin's casual attitude helped everyone feel less nervous, and they all found places to sit around him. "Professor, why is this place so big? Did you build it?" Hermione asked, her eyes wide with amazement as she took in the vast interior space. Yes, this is training room number 1, the one with the lowest risk. Once construction is complete, I plan to open it to the entire school, Anduin explained, raising his hand. This way, you can practice freely here in the future. He pointed to various areas around the room and introduced them to the gathered freshmen. The swimming pool in the distance is the swimming training ground. The area full of sandbags is for reaction training, and the section with rattan swords is for combat training. Right now, we are in the comprehensive physical fitness training ground. Although each training area seems connected, I've separated them with air walls. Only authorized personnel can enter each section. Wow, will we have all our classes here in the future? Ron asked, clearly preferring this clean, organized space over the intimidating playground outside. The freshmen's courses will mainly be held here, Anduin replied with a smile. You've just started school, and you haven't even learned any spells yet. You also haven't built up your physical endurance, so you can't handle high-intensity training. Long-distance running would exhaust you, right? The young wizards nodded in agreement, still feeling the soreness from their earlier exercises. They were all apprehensive about the afternoon training session. Seeing their reactions, Anduin continued, So, for the first month of school, I won't put too much burden on you. If you become physically exhausted, it will only cause more problems. Your most important task now is to stick to running and eating well in the mornings to improve your physical fitness. Once you can complete the morning exercises, we'll begin formal training. Then what are we going to do now? Is it a theory class? Hermione asked, noticing Anduin's kind demeanor and feeling more comfortable speaking up without raising her hand. The theory of tactical training is too complex for you at this stage, Anduin said, shaking his head slightly. The curriculum he designed was initially meant for adult aurors, not underage wizards. Younger students don't need to learn about tactical formations and crossfire just yet. Ah? Hermione pouted in disappointment. She had spent the previous night previewing the textbook for today's class, memorizing many technical terms she didn't fully understand. But speaking of theoretical knowledge, there is indeed something important I need to explain to you, Anduin said, changing the subject. Gryffindor and Slytherin had a charms class this morning, and Professor Flitwick should have introduced you to the levitation charm. Yes, Professor! Professor Flitwick said our main task for the first month is to learn this spell. But since we just started today, few of us have succeeded in casting it, Harry replied, this being his first direct conversation with Mr. Wilson. I see, Anduin nodded. He had asked Flitwick to prioritize the levitation charm in the curriculum. Although the spells taught in previous years were similar, the order of teaching often depended on Flitwick's preferences. Has anyone here successfully cast the levitation charm? Anduin asked, looking around at the group. Anduin smiled and looked at everyone. When Hermione heard this, she immediately raised her right hand high, excitedly. She was afraid that if she raised her hand slowly, Anduin might not notice her. However, this was a bit redundant because no one else had raised their hand except Hermione. Although some students had successfully cast spells in previous classes, they couldn't guarantee 100% success. Hermione's enthusiasm made Ron, who was sitting next to her, roll his eyes. Why does she always have to show off? Very good. 5 points to Gryffindor. Anduin nodded in satisfaction. He then took out a small metal ball from his pocket. Everyone should know what this is, right? This is a sensory ball? The teaching aid that we need to purchase from the admission list. Hermione immediately answered, perhaps encouraged by the extra points she had just earned. That's right. Now, Miss Granger, try using the levitation charm on it, Anduin said, tossing the sensory ball lightly. The ball hovered in front of Hermione. Wingardium Leviosa! Hermione, being the top student in Gryffindor, performed the spell with precision. The ball floated under her control. The other students from the 4 houses watched quietly, unable to understand what Anduin was planning. How does it feel? Anduin asked Hermione with a smile. Can you tell the difference between casting a spell on the sensory ball and casting a spell on the feather in the charms class? Hermione controlled the ball to float above her head and then frowned. This sensory ball, why is it so difficult to control? It feels a little slippery to me. Yes, it seems you have a talent for perception, Anduin nodded appreciatively. This sensory ball is a special auxiliary training tool. It has an irregular displacement device fitted inside. So when casting spells on it, you will find that the sensory ball is extremely difficult to control. What you need to do is to continue casting spells on it after learning the levitation charm, then control it and persist for as long as possible. In this way, you can exercise your magic power perception and control while continuously outputting magic power. After nearly a minute, Hermione felt she couldn't hold on any longer, and the sensory ball fell to the ground. Just as it was about to hit the ground, a sudden suction force was generated, and the ball flew straight back to Anduin's hand. Is this a way to exercise magic perception and control? Does that mean this kind of training can improve magic sensitivity, that is, intelligence? Hermione asked, slightly frustrated but quickly understanding the concept. That's right. As Miss Granger guessed, this kind of training can indeed improve intelligence, which is the core of the training method. Anduin nodded approvingly. So now, in addition to your daily morning exercises, you should learn the levitation charm as soon as possible. The sooner you master this basic spell, the sooner you can start exercising your intelligence. Ah, is it really that simple to exercise intelligence? The young wizards immediately began discussing excitedly. They had long wanted to know how to improve their intelligence and were thrilled that Anduin was teaching them this in the first class. Indeed, this is the basic training method for exercising magic sensitivity, Anduin said, tossing the sensory ball in his hand. But don't think that this is particularly simple. Anduin continued. If you want to truly achieve the effect of increasing the sensitivity of magic power, you can't just cast a spell on the sensory ball. The most critical method is destructive mental compensation. Compensation? Everyone displayed puzzled expressions upon hearing this unfamiliar term. The so-called destructive spiritual compensation, simply put, involves pushing one's magic power and spirit to their limits when casting a spell until they are completely overdrawn and can't continue, Anduin explained. Once your magic power recovers, you'll intuitively feel your spirit gradually growing. This effect is most noticeable at the beginning of the practice. If you cast a spell casually for just a minute or two, it won't have such a significant impact. In essence, this concept is akin to fitness training. High-intensity strength training causes friction damage to muscle fibers during contraction and relaxation. After protein repair, muscle growth becomes evident. Similarly, training magic power involves overloading, but not excessively, to avoid injury. Properly gauging the amount of overload is the most crucial aspect of this training method. So, after you have fully mastered the floating spell, you need to undergo complete sensitivity training under my supervision to determine your limit time before practicing on your own, Anduin continued. Perseverance is also very important. My suggestion is that everyone do a training session before bed each day, so it won't interfere with your other activities. After all, overdrawing your magic power isn't easy. Anduin not only explained the training methods and precautions clearly, but also offered his own suggestions based on his training habits. Then if we all learn the floating spell in the next class, can we all do this kind of training? Neville asked eagerly, his eyes bright with anticipation. His intelligence was lower than others, so he was particularly keen to improve this attribute. If you can learn it in the next class, there should be no problem, Anduin replied. He then turned to look at Hermione in the front row. But to achieve this goal, I suggest you ask the students who have already learned it first. Hermione, realizing Anduin was referring to her, raised her head proudly, causing Ron to roll his eyes. You just said this is a basic training method. Does that mean there are more advanced training methods? Harry asked, a hint of greed in his voice. With his intelligence already at strides, he was eager to further develop his strengths. Indeed, Anduin replied with a slight smile, revealing the induction ball in his hand. End of this chapter. Chapter 644, Games. After you continue to practice magic power overdraft for a period of time, you will find that your control over magic power will gradually increase. At the same time, controlling the induction ball will become easier, and you will even be able to cast spells for a long time, Anduin explained. By this time, everyone's levitation spell should be at level 2 or 3. Then, you can try not to use wands and control the induction ball with your own perception. After finishing his explanation, Anduin tossed the ball lightly, and it floated quietly above his palm. Once you reach this level, you can even try other tricks. As he spoke, the induction ball floated around Anduin's palm and shuttled back and forth between his fingers, appearing extremely agile, as if it had a life of its own. If everyone still feels very relaxed at this point, you can try to continue casting spells for a long time. Anduin then threw the metal ball over his head, and it floated quietly above his forehead. Continuously casting spells and getting used to it is the trick to train the sensitivity of magic power. When you can keep the induction ball above your head for a whole day without feeling tired, you can try to balance 2 or 3 balls. There are many ways to play with the induction ball, and you can explore them on your own in the future. Anduin explained to everyone in a gentle tone. So this little ball has so many tricks. Ron looked enviously at the induction ball in the professor's hand. He then thought about how he hadn't even learned the levitation curse yet, and felt a bit frustrated. He glanced at Hermione, wondering if he should ask her for advice. "Professor, do you also use this training method for self-practice?" Hermione asked, curious about Anduin's proficient manipulation. "You ask me," Anduin chuckled. "As the founder of this training method, of course, I practice like this. In fact, I'm practicing right now." He stretched out his index finger and pointed slightly towards the top of his head. Immediately, all the little wizards saw hundreds of induction balls falling from the ceiling, hovering 3 or 4 meters above the crowd, like raindrops suspended in the air. Wow! The little wizards were shocked, their mouths agape. Could this be the amount of training required for a wizard of this level? It seemed too exaggerated. After briefly showing it to everyone, Anduin waved his hand lightly, and the induction balls flew back into the sky. Even so, the little wizards were still dumbfounded, staring upwards in amazement. "Okay, stop staring. What you need to do now is to master the levitation curse properly. Otherwise, all this is just empty talk." Anduin clapped his hands lightly to bring everyone back to their senses. After witnessing Anduin's own training, the little wizards were determined to become as strong as the professor. Even Ron, who usually ignored Hermione, immediately approached her. "Hermione, can you find time to teach us when we get back? I can't wait to learn the levitation curse." "No problem," Hermione replied proudly, pleased that Ron was finally acknowledging her. The young wizards at the scene began discussing among themselves. Some planned to seek help from senior wizards to learn the levitation curse, while others, like Ron, decided to get close to friends who had already mastered it. Anduin's demonstration had completely piqued their interest. Everyone's high interest, Anduin also nodded in satisfaction. Interest and thirst for knowledge are always the driving force behind everyone's progress. However, after a short while of muttering, everyone regained their composure, and then they continued to look at Anduin eagerly. "Professor, what are we going to learn next?" Harry and the others had already lost their fear of the tactical training course at the beginning, and even looked forward to it. "Yeah." Anduin took out his pocket watch and looked at it. "We still have a whole class, so let's use the remaining time to play a game." For these freshmen, who have just entered the school, Anduin was mindful not to overwhelm them too soon. It would take at least half a month to put real pressure on them. Playing games? What games? When everyone heard that there was such a good thing as playing games in class, they immediately regained their energy. "The name of this game is Hit Hog." Anduin grinned and glanced at Hog, who was leisurely scratching his neck, and then snapped his fingers. Immediately afterwards, a small bucket appeared in front of everyone, containing more than a dozen small balls about the size of a bar of soap. Each of these small balls looked colorful and very gorgeous. These props are called colorful balls. Sensitive conductors are added inside. After throwing them out, they can be manipulated and changed freely according to your thoughts. Even little wizards who haven't entered school can barely control them. And after hitting someone, it will leave a color ball mark on the opponent. This mark will stay on the person for at least 3 hours before it slowly disappears. This is a new toy that Silver Flash Trading Company is planning to launch during the Christmas holidays. You just happen to test them for me, and at the same time, you can practice your mind control. The target is Hog. I know you have been unhappy with him for a long time, so I will give you a chance to vent your anger. Anduin smiled and slowly backed away. Hog had been lazy lately, so this was a good opportunity to let him exercise. Wow! Hog had been distracted before, but after hearing Anduin's words, he trembled as if he realized it. Hit him! After hearing the game explained by Anduin, the young wizards at the scene couldn't wait any longer. They had been tormented by Hog, a vicious dog, after only 2 days in school. They already hated him to the bone. Especially Ron, who, after yelling, took the keg and rushed towards Hog, throwing the colored ball in his hand at the opponent desperately. The others were not to be outdone at this time. Even girls like Hermione rolled up their sleeves and joined the fray, which showed how annoying Hog was. Just because you want to fight Mr. Hog too? Hog reacted extremely quickly, rushing out like a gust of wind. Chase! Malfoy was also a little addicted to this game. He yelled and led the large group to chase Hog. He didn't even realize that his companions beside him were Ron and other Gryffindors. Just like that, this group of little wizards was like a bunch of crazy locusts, chasing Hog and running around the field, with colored balls flying all over the sky. But it's not for nothing that Hog was trained by Anduin for so many years. He dashed left and right nimbly, quickly dodging the oncoming colored balls. Because of his very fast speed, it was very difficult for these little wizards to catch him. Even Hog knew how to counterattack. He would often slap individual colored balls back into the crowd with his claws, leaving indelible color marks on those little wizards. No, we won't be able to catch up to him if this continues. Let's split up and act. Malfoy was already panting after chasing him, but his interest became stronger and stronger. There is also this colored ball. The professor said that it can be controlled by thoughts. We threw it too hastily before, so we didn't have time to study it properly. Ron naturally took over the conversation, adding, "And we need to retrieve those ammunitions. We don't have many colored balls left." Although Harry was panting heavily, the light in his eyes showed he was still full of energy. The young wizards spontaneously began discussing tactics. Even Malfoy and Ron seemed to have forgotten their previous animosities, focusing instead on countermeasures. After a while, the group reorganized their formation. They divided the playground into 4 areas, assigning a small team to each zone to chase and intercept Hog. They even designated some logistics personnel to collect ammunition. With their new strategy, the little wizards took action again. Instead of chasing and fighting fiercely, they defended their own areas, using colored balls to compress Hog's activity space. After a while, Hog was finally hit by the flying colored balls. The young wizards cheered as if they had won a significant victory, their enthusiasm growing. Realizing he had been hit by an ordinary brat, Hog became vicious, fighting back with all his might. Since he had already been hit, he saw no difference between being hit once or countless times. He picked up the colored balls that had fallen to the ground and threw them back like a turret. Soon, the chase turned into an all-out colored ball fight. The young wizards, now fully immersed in the game, didn't care about their image and fired back at Hog with gusto. "I see," Anduin, who had been quietly observing from the side, rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "A common enemy can strengthen cohesion and help them unite. Facing a slightly stronger but not overwhelming enemy can be more engaging." He continued, "Moreover, combining work and rest seems to motivate these children more than rigid training. They've already run more than 2 kilometers and are still full of energy." "Understood," Anduin nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. It seems that after completing basic training, using games to integrate the skills they've learned could be very effective. Feeling inspired, Anduin looked at the colorful Hog, who had been hit by numerous colored balls, with a smile. There was a glint of unknown meaning in his eyes. End of this chapter. Chapter 645, Shooting Lesson. When Harry and the freshmen returned to the auditorium after finishing the tactical training course, they immediately attracted everyone's attention. "Ha! What kind of look do you all have?" George and Fred couldn't help laughing at Harry and his party, who were all covered in colorful prints. The first-year freshmen, having engaged in a fierce battle with Hog, were all marked with various colors. Even girls like Hermione were no exception, making them look like walking rainbows. The color prints on their clothes were one thing, but the marks on their faces were too obvious. Among them, Ron, Harry, Neville, and Malfoy stood out the most, resembling human neon lights. Evil spirits. Professor Wilson didn't tell us that the marks made by these colored balls are actually luminous. Now we are more conspicuous than magic lamps? Ron muttered uncontrollably. It's not that you're so stupid. You don't even know how to dodge when you see Hog's counterattack. Malfoy pointed at Ron's face and laughed. Your eyes are like two red-hot coal balls. It's so funny. You still have the nerve to talk about me? You're an idiot who only knows how to hide behind us. Ron glared at Malfoy, dissatisfied. And your Christmas tree look also has the nerve to laugh at others. You should hurry up and look in the mirror. After the class was over, Malfoy and Ron continued their bickering, and after entering the auditorium, they exchanged a few harsh words before separating with a humph. However, it was clear that after the previous class, the relationship between the two groups was no longer as sharp as before. Of course, they still didn't like each other. Harry, tell me what happened to you all. Why did you change color after not seeing anyone all afternoon? Fred and George came over immediately after Harry and the others took their seats. Harry scratched his head in embarrassment, but still smiled and said, Isn't it the tactical training course in the afternoon? Don't look at us so miserably, but this class was very interesting. Immediately, Harry, Ron, and Neville recounted what happened in the previous class to their friends around them, and the eyes of all the students in the Lions School lit up. So the first class not only didn't have training, but also played games, right? That's much more interesting than our Defense Against the Dark Arts class. The smell of Professor Quirrell almost made us faint. George smiled and rubbed the color print on Ron's face. I remember we also have a training session tomorrow. I've long disliked that bastard Hog, and now he is even more annoying than Peeves. We have to deal with him tomorrow, Fred said, gearing up with a mischievous smile. Then you may have to live with the color printing for a whole day. The professor said that the mark left by the colored ball only lasts for 3 hours, but it doesn't seem to fade at all now. I think the quality of this toy is clearly problematic. Ron pushed George's hand away irritably and then complained. George shook his head indifferently. But I think the colorful balls you mentioned are very interesting. I will definitely buy a few to play with during the Christmas holidays. We'll let Ginny know how good they are. Hey, that's a good idea. Unexpectedly, Brother Anduin also has research on this kind of joke props. Maybe we can discuss with him and sell our works in Silver Flash Trading Company, Fred said, praising George's proposal. What, are you making these kinds of toys too? It was the first time Harry had heard that the twins had such a hobby. That's right, look at this. George took out a candy box from his pocket. This is fast-acting skipping class candy. There are many flavors, the best choice for skipping classes. For example, this is Tudu candy. Eating one will make you vomit for a long time. After listening to George's introduction, Harry rubbed his back in disgust. But can this thing hide from the Silver Flash talisman? Well, George smiled awkwardly. We didn't expect Broth or Anduin to come up with a silver glitter amulet. Then what's the use of your broken candy other than disgusting people? Ron rolled his eyes in exasperation. We're still researching other products. Besides, we just can't hide the amulet now. Maybe we can find a way to fool the system in the future? Fred muttered, a bit unwillingly. Do you think Uncle Wilson will renew the amulet after you research new products? Do you think your little trick can fool him? Ron shook his head in disgust. Seeing his brother's expression, George and Fred immediately started bickering with him. The group of Gryffindor lion cubs spent the rest of the dinner amidst laughter and playful banter. After they returned to the common room, Harry, Ron, Neville, and others all found Hermione. After the training session in the afternoon, everyone became very interested in improving their intelligence attributes. Harry wanted to develop his strengths, Ron didn't want his attributes to look so ordinary, and Neville, whose sensitivity to magic power was his weakest point, felt the most urgency. Hermione showed enough patience in the face of their humble requests for advice. Although she was always domineering and quick to rebuke everyone's mistakes, they still greeted her with a smile, eager to learn. The little wizards, who had just received their wands, were still unfamiliar with the magic power channeled through them, and were not yet proficient in spells. After a night of practice, although everyone successfully cast the levitation charm several times, they still couldn't guarantee 100% success. The next day, the third graders, who were about to have their first class, walked towards the circular stone pile with smiles on their faces. They had heard from the freshmen that the first tactical training course seemed to be very easy. "Today, I want to show Hog why the flowers are so red," George said with a smirk, showing something to Fred. "Look, I brought a big dung bomb. If we play an Easter egg game later, I'll mix it into the ammunition and let Hog try it out." "Hey, I brought one too." Fred patted his bulging trouser pocket, not to be outdone. "That bastard Hog dared to yell at us during his morning exercise. He probably doesn't know how powerful we are." The two looked at each other and smiled, then unknowingly quickened their pace. But when they arrived at the playground, they found Anduin waiting for everyone outside, instead of leading them into the so-called first training room, as Harry and the others had described the previous night. "Hurry up! Your classes are very intense today. Don't waste your time," Anduin urged, his face stern. "Professor, aren't we having classes indoors today?" Cedric Diggory, a Hufflepuff student who was also very familiar with Anduin, approached him with a smile. He was actually looking forward to the game the freshman had mentioned. "Who told you to have classes indoors?" Anduin gave Cedric a blank look. "Not every grade has the same curriculum. You are all in the third grade. Why would you still play house like freshmen?" Choked by Anduin's words, everyone's mood immediately turned cold. It seemed their hopes had been in vain. George and Fred exchanged wry smiles. After scanning the crowd and making sure that all the third graders had arrived, Anduin waved his hand. "Come, follow me into the shooting range." With that, Anduin led the way, guiding the group a few steps to a semi-open-air room that was very close to the ringstone pile. The area was quite large, and the first thing that caught their eye was a row of half-person high compartments serving as the shooting area. Looking around, there were at least 30 compartments that could be used as shooting positions. Opposite these compartments was a shooting area filled with sand and gravel. Simple round targets floated at distances of 10 meters, 30 meters, and 50 meters from each shooting position. After everyone entered the shooting range, Anduin turned to face them, his expression serious. "Your first class today is Basic Tactical Offie, NSE in Defense, focusing mainly on shooting training and parrying fixed targets." Shooting? Parrying? Everyone's eyes lit up at the mention. They had been a bit frustrated earlier because they hadn't had a chance to deal with Hog, but now it seemed Anduin was planning to get them into practice right away. That sounded like fun. After all, at Hogwarts, once they learned spells, they rarely got to use them outside of class. Especially self-defense spells, casting them at will could result in point deductions if caught. At that moment, Anduin raised the clipboard in his hand and glanced at it. "From the results of the physical examination, you third graders have already learned the repelling curse and the disarming curse in your Defense Against the Dark Arts class. Is that correct?" "Yes, Professor." Lee Jordan, who was standing in the front row, nodded. "But we don't have much chance to use these self-defense spells, so we're a bit rusty." "Then you'll have to brush up on them today." Anduin looked around at the group. "Next, I want to see your actual spellcasting abilities." He pointed to one of the twins and then to a target 10 meters away. "George, cast a disarming spell and aim at that target." "Professor, I'm Fred, and he's George." The twins pointed to themselves with a smirk and then to each other. "Really?" Anduin stared at them coldly. "Then your name is George today. Any objections?" "No," George replied awkwardly, giving his brother a puzzled look as if to say, "Why does Brother Anduin always recognize us accurately?" End of this chapter. Chapter 646, Fighting Posture. Fred didn't dare to take any action other than shrugging helplessly at George. George, who initially wanted to make a joke, but was now frightened, obeyed the order to come to the shooting position closest to him. He then took an exaggerated step forward, stretched his left hand out, raised his wand high, and shouted imposingly, "Expelliarmus!" Immediately afterward, he swung his wand forward with force. George's spellcasting style was a bit exaggerated, but the spell itself wasn't bad, though the speed was not satisfactory. However, there was a clear problem with his aim. Despite the target being a fixed one just 10 meters away, George's disarming spell missed it entirely. "What are you doing? Performing a comedy?" Anduin stared at George, dissatisfied. "Why are you using this strange posture to cast a spell?" George scratched his head in embarrassment. "I thought it would look cooler this way, and the center of gravity feels more stable. I've seen many duelists in magic books with this stance. If you fight in this posture, it's no wonder you'll get beaten up. Don't always read those idle books." After complaining to George, Anduin tilted his head again. "Cedric, come here and try it. Use the disarming spell." "Yes, Professor." Seeing George being scolded so badly, Cedric couldn't help but chuckle secretly. He and the Weasleys were neighbors, so he was well aware of Anduin's relationship with them. "Expelliarmus?" Cedric acted more normally when casting the spell. He stood with his legs apart and then stretched his wand forward. Although his spell was a bit short, it still hit the lower part of the target. When the round target was hit by his spell, a number 2 suddenly flashed in the center of the target, lit up for 2 seconds before slowly fading away. Seeing this, Cedric was a little confused but still looked back at Anduin with a smile. After all, he hit the target, so he expected some praise from the professor. But Anduin frowned slightly. "Cedric, few of you have upgraded the disarming curse to level 3. Why is the accuracy so poor? You only hit the second ring on a 2-meter target." "Ah, didn't I hit it?" Cedric didn't expect to be reprimanded instead of praised. A hit is just the most basic requirement. Anduin shook his head helplessly. "Let me explain briefly. Each of these targets is divided into 10 rings, and the number of rings will be displayed for each hit. The first ring is the outermost, and the 10th ring is the center. Hitting the second ring on a 2-meter target is really inappropriate." I'm sorry, Professor. I was wrong." Cedric lowered his head, feeling a bit ashamed. His character was not as jumpy as the twins. He was a very pure Hufflepuff. Calm, upright, and hard-working. "It's not your fault. Don't apologize for mistakes that don't exist." Anduin shook his head with a gentle expression. "I'm just a little worried about the quality of your previous defense against the dark arts classes. If your accuracy is this poor, others are likely even worse. And it can be seen that you have not received any training in combat spellcasting. Your spellcasting posture is also a big problem. All of you, gather around now." Anduin called out, then entered a shooting position himself. The application scenarios of magic, such as the self-defense spell, are all in real battles, so shooting posture is a very important part. Now, I will explain it to you in detail and demonstrate it again. A group of young wizards immediately gathered around Anduin, each one eager to learn. Anduin turned his body with his right foot in front and his left foot behind. In combat, we must first maintain our own stability and secondly, reduce the hit area. So I will teach you the simplest posture first. Stand sideways with your dominant hand in front and keep your eyes on the target at all times, Anduin instructed. Subsequent shots and withdrawals must be clean and tidy. Unless continuous casting is required, don't keep stretching your hands. Anduin demonstrate. At a quick shot, then swiftly stopped. The movement of raising the hand is swing forward to attack, and the movement of closing the hand is swing back to attack. The key to fast casting is to shorten the time of swinging back and forth as much as possible. This also facilitates subsequent adjustments. Casting a spell for a second or two like George is simply courting death. Everyone nodded thoughtfully, while George scratched his head in embarrassment. He had thought his previous fighting style was very cool. Next is firing the spell. To ensure shooting accuracy, our hands must be stable and level with our shoulders when we raise our hands. Once accuracy improves, we can consider simplifying the movements. Draw your weapons, Anduin commanded. He then cast the spell 3 times in a row, as fast as lightning. Each spell was cast cleanly, almost creating afterimages in everyone's eyes. The 3 disarming spells fired in a row were almost in a straight line. The first shot hit the 10-meter target instantly, causing it to fall and make way for the following spells. The second spell hit the 30-meter target, and the third hit the 50-meter target. All 3 targets were hit within a second, each showing a perfect score of 10. Wow! Everyone was dazzled by Anduin's fluid attack moves. It was incredibly impressive, but Anduin wasn't finished. After completing the attack, don't stay there watching the result. Immediately enter an evasion action or seek cover. I will explain the dodging movements in detail when I teach you the fighting steps. Now, I'll show you how to dodge behind a bunker and cast spells from a squatting position. Anduin stepped on a button at the foot of the shooting position, causing a wooden plank half a person's height to rise from the ground. He quickly squatted down and lowered his head slightly. When hiding behind a bunker, try to let the bunker completely cover you. Observe quickly and neatly to reduce the possibility of injury. As for the attack, it is similar to the standing posture. The key is not to expose too much of yourself and to quickly dodge after the attack. Don't be greedy for the results of the battle. Anduin demonstrated by quickly sticking out half of his head, glancing around, and immediately dropping down. He then got up again, poked out half of his chest, quickly raised his hand to cast a spell, and retreated to cover after casting. He repeated this process 3 times, each time scoring a perfect 10 with the disarming curse. Everyone watched in awe, their mouths agape. The only word that flashed in their minds was professional. Could they really learn such standard professional tactics? Okay, the basic spellcasting postures have been explained. Now it's time to practice, Anduin said, facing everyone. From now on, everyone must cast the disarming charm 3 times in a standard standing position, then perform 3 cycles of concealment, observation, and shooting actions in a crouching position. In addition, I want to tell you that the round target in front of you will only fall when you hit a score of 7 or more, revealing a new target for you to aim at. Let's start with the nearest 10-meter target first. I want to see who will be the first to hit the 50-meter target. Following Anduin's order, the third-year students immediately sprang into action, quickly filling all 30 shooting positions. After witnessing Anduin's demonstration, they were eager to try it out for themselves. The rest of the students stood behind, waiting for their turn. Those in the shooting positions obediently stepped aside and joined the line at the back after completing 2 spells in 6 positions. Meanwhile, Anduin was not idle. He patrolled behind the shooting positions, carefully correcting mistakes for everyone. His primary goal today was to teach them basic fighting postures. Shooting accuracy was secondary. If they weren't accurate, they could always practice more in the future. After 2 rounds of shooting, everyone gradually found their rhythm. The speed, and accuracy of their spellcasting improved significantly, and some students even managed to hit the 30-meter target. Finally, after 2 rounds of practice, the first student to hit the 50-meter target emerged. "Good job, Cedric," Anduin said, coming up behind Cedric and patting him on the shoulder appreciatively. "Your posture and precision have improved rapidly. Keep up the momentum and continue working hard. I hope you'll be able to hit the 50-meter target consistently." "Thank you, Professor." Cedric blushed with excitement. It was no wonder he was so thrilled. Anduin was known for being strict, so receiving his approval was a significant achievement. Inspired by Cedric's praise, the other students became even more eager to earn Anduin's recognition. However, before their excitement could fully take hold, Anduin stopped their practice. "All right, everyone, that's enough for now. The time for the first class is up." "Ah? Is it over already? Didn't we have 2 classes in a row? Can't we practice a bit longer?" The students were visibly disappointed, their excitement turning to dismay at the sudden halt. "There will be plenty of opportunities to practice in the future," Anduin reassured them with a slight smile. "This shooting range will be open to the school. You just need to apply through Hog. His office is in the house at the outermost part of the playground. You can come here during your free time to practice." Hearing this, the students were overjoyed, though some couldn't help but grumble. They were happy about the opportunity to use the shooting range for practice, but the idea of needing Hog's approval was less appealing. And the fact that Hog, a dog, had an office was even more perplexing to them. End of this chapter. Chapter 647, Training Room Number 6. After finishing the first lesson on fighting postures, Anduin led the group back to the large playground outside the shooting range. He then asked everyone to sit down in a big circle while he stood in the center to explain the next lesson. After the shooting training just now, you should all have a basic understanding of spellcasting postures, concealment, and observation during battle. Next, I will teach you another essential combat skill, parry. Cedric, come here and cast a disarming spell on me, Anduin instructed, motioning for Cedric to join him in the circle. Yes, Professor, Cedric responded obediently. He positioned himself 5 or 6 meters away from Anduin, and applying the fighting posture he had just learned, raised his hand quickly and cast Expelliarmus! The group of young wizards observed the demonstration closely. They noticed that Cedric's spell-casting technique was precise and sudden, making it difficult for a typical wizard to react quickly. However, Anduin remained calm. He didn't immediately counter the spell. Instead, with a flick of his wand, he deflected the disarming spell effortlessly. Continue, Anduin commanded. Try to speed up your casting and even move around. The more unexpected the attack, the better. Yes, Professor. Cedric, eager to prove himself, fired spell after spell, moving flexibly around Anduin. After casting 7 or 8 spells, he even managed to position himself behind Anduin. However, Anduin effortlessly turned to face Cedric each time, accurately and quickly blocking and deflecting every spell with just his wand. Okay, that's enough for now. You can sit down, Anduin said, nodding in satisfaction. He then addressed the group. You all saw what I just did. Let's discuss your observations. When you faced Cedric's attack, you didn't cast any spells. You just used your wand to deflect the attacking spells, one student noted. I've seen this technique before. My father is an Auror, and he can block spells without using protective spells when he practices with his teammates, another added. Is this the parry technique you mentioned, Professor? Does this mean we don't need to learn the shield charm? A curious student asked. The young wizards were abuzz with conversation. While some were familiar with the technique, many were intrigued, as they had always relied on the shield charm for defense, which they wouldn't learn until the 6th grade. That's correct. This technique of using just a wand for defense is called parry, Anduin confirmed. It's commonly used in wizard duels. While it may not seem like a high-level skill to experienced duelists, it is still challenging for beginners to master. Don't be fooled by how easy it looked when I blocked the spells. Although parrying doesn't require casting a spell, it does require the use of magic. The first step in parrying is to channel your magic into your wand. Anduin raised his wand gently. If you just hold your wand without channeling magic into it, it's no different from holding a dead object. Let's start by practicing this step. The young wizards nodded in understanding and pulled out their wands, ready to try channeling their magic. The top half of a sphere embedded in the ground. Inside, the room was spacious and well lit, with various magical devices lining the walls. Anduin led the group to the center of the room, where several contraptions stood ready. These are the automatic spellcasters, he explained, gesturing to the devices. They will help you practice your parrying skills by casting spells at you at different speeds and intensities. The students looked at the machines with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Don't worry, Anduin reassured them. These devices are designed to be safe for training purposes. They will only cast low-power spells, just enough to help you improve your reflexes and accuracy. He turned to Cedric. Cedric, you did well earlier. Now, let's see if you can improve your parrying with the help of these machines. Remember, focus on the timing and precision of your movements. Cedric nodded, determination etched on his face. He took his position in front of one of the spellcasters, wand at the ready. Anduin activated the machine, and it began to cast spells at a moderate pace. Cedric's eyes were fixed on the incoming spells. He raised his wand and attempted to parry the first spell. This time, his movements were more fluid, and he managed to deflect the spell with a satisfying snap. Excellent, Anduin praised. Now, Keep practicing. The rest of you, take turns using the other spellcasters. Remember, focus on your timing and precision. The students eagerly took their positions, and the room soon filled with the sounds of spells being cast and deflected. Anduin moved among them, offering guidance and encouragement. George and Fred, always competitive, tried to outdo each other in their parrying skills. "Watch this, Fred," George called out as he deftly deflected a spell. "Not bad, but check this out," Fred responded, successfully parrying a spell with a flourish. Anduin couldn't help but smile at their enthusiasm. "Good job, both of you. Keep it up." After an hour of intense practice, Anduin called for a break. The students, though tired, were visibly more confident in their abilities. "You've all made great progress," Anduin said, his voice filled with pride. "Remember, parrying is not just about deflecting spells. It's about understanding the flow of magic and reacting instinctively. With more practice, you'll become even more proficient." As they left the training room, George turned to Fred. "You know, this is actually pretty fun. I never thought I'd enjoy parrying spells so much." Fred grinned. "Yeah, and with Brother Anduin teaching us, we're bound to become experts in no time." Anduin overheard their conversation and chuckled. "I'm glad to see you're enjoying the training. Keep up the hard work, and you'll all become skilled wizards." The group walked back to the main building, their spirits high. They knew that with Anduin's guidance, they were on the path to becoming formidable wizards, capable of handling any challenge that came their way. A round bowl buckled down, but after everyone entered, they found an entirely different universe inside. The interior revealed a vast circular venue, spacious enough to easily accommodate hundreds of people. Suspended in the air were peculiar metal boxes, each about the size of a fruit crate, with a round tube the size of a baseball protruding from one side. After leading the crowd into the arena, Anduin waved his hand lightly, causing one of the metal boxes to descend. The box then ejected a ball, emitting a light blue glow, resembling a baseball machine. "This kind of prop is called a simple magic bullet," Anduin explained, catching the blue ball. "Its structure consists of a special glue filled with a small amount of pure magic power. Since it is primarily composed of magic, it can be influenced by wands and spells. However, because the magic power is minimal, it is essentially harmless and doesn't hurt much when it hits someone." To demonstrate, Anduin swung the ball vigorously, hitting George, who was whispering to Fred, on the head. The magic bullet exploded like a soap bubble upon impact and then dissipated into the air. George immediately clutched his forehead in pain. "Didn't you say it was harmless? Why does it hurt so much?" he complained. "That only means your physical fitness is lacking, and you need more practice," Anduin replied coldly, not revealing that he had increased his strength intentionally. "As for the floating instruments above you, they are automatic spellcasters. They can launch simple magic bullets with varying force, speed, and angles. Let me demonstrate." Anduin instructed the crowd to disperse. 7 or 8 automatic spellcasters descended around him, aiming their cannons at him. Bang, bang, bang! With a series of crisp bang-bang sounds, the spellcasters fired magic bullets at Anduin simultaneously from different angles and distances. End of this chapter. Chapter 648, Post-Mortem Examination. However, when faced with the barrage of magic bullets, Anduin's movements were swift and precise. He didn't dodge a single one. Instead, he used his wand like a skilled fencer to deflect the incoming magic balls. Each time his wand made contact, the magic balls split apart, much like weak spells. From this perspective, the magic balls were indeed akin to spells, though they were primarily useful for practice. These magic balls were a result of Anduin's research over the years. Despite their low power, their cost was negligible, making them perfect for use as consumables during training. The little wizards watched Anduin's smooth operation with rapt attention. Unlike Cedric's earlier spell, these machines fired magic balls simultaneously, creating a dense barrage that would be difficult for any normal wizard to evade, let alone parry. After parrying several rounds of attacks, Anduin flicked his wand, causing the instruments to float back into the air. Training Room Number 6 is designed to help you exercise your parry and dodge abilities. In the upcoming step training classes, you'll use the equipment here for practice, he explained. These spellcasters are very flexible. You can adjust the number, rate of fire, angle, and launch interval. Since you're just starting to learn parrying, let's begin with one spellcaster at the slowest firing speed. Following Anduin's instructions, each student was assigned an automatic spellcaster that began to rhythmically throw magic balls at a basic parallel angle. The little wizards were soon engrossed in the activity, but their initial carelessness quickly led to some painful lessons. Although the magic balls were not powerful, they still stung when they hit. Many students found their wrists swelling from the repeated impacts as they struggled to catch the rhythm. Anduin showed no mercy. He believed that learning required effort, and he had already optimized the training process significantly. It would be unreasonable for the students not to endure a bit of intensity. The intensive practice proved effective. Despite frequent hits, the little wizards made rapid progress. By the end of the class, most students could successfully parry the magic balls a few times. After finishing the third grade class, Anduin instructed everyone to practice more at the shooting range and training room number 6 throughout the week. He announced that he would conduct random inspections in the next class. The little wizards nodded in agreement, though they didn't need much urging. They were genuinely interested in shooting and parrying, as young people often yearn for combat. By noon, the third graders were nursing swollen hands. Although the hits during practice only caused minor pain at the time, the after effects soon became apparent. "Your courses are different from ours, aren't they?" Harry asked the twins while enjoying his lunch. After 2 days of practice, his appetite had grown significantly, almost matching that of the third graders. "What do you mean by different?" George replied, wincing as he covered his hands. "It's completely different. Our courses aren't similar at all, and even the teaching locations are different." "Did the professor teach you the training method?" Ron inquired, reaching for more food. George poked Ron's wrist a bit harshly and then quickly returned a heavy elbow. "Don't touch it. Are you looking for trouble?" George glared at Ron, annoyed, and then replied truthfully, "Of course, the training method was taught. The professor stopped us 10 minutes before class ended and guided us on the spot to exercise our magic sensitivity using induction balls." "How long did you manage to hold on?" Harry asked, more concerned about the training methods he had heard about, as spell shooting was still too advanced for freshmen. "Less than 5 minutes, Fred recalled, shrugging. "We were exhausted from those 2 classes. It took a lot of mana just to keep casting spells and parrying, so everyone could only hold on for a short time. The professor said this kind of delayed training drains the last drop of magic power in the body, which is why it's taught at the end of the course." "How does it feel after training?" Neville interjected. "I heard it's not very pleasant. Is that true?" "It's not just unpleasant," George sighed. "I felt like I was going to faint after finishing the training. It was like all the strength was drained from my body. We had to rest in the training room for a long time before we could leave." "Is it really that bad?" Hermione looked skeptically at the twins, who had exaggerated expressions. Since she started giving Harry and the others extra lessons, their relationship had improved, and they now spent a lot of time together in and out of class. "Try it yourself after you learn the levitating charm." George smiled and shook his head. "I'm still dizzy now, and we have potions class this afternoon, which is the worst. That old bat is definitely going to give us trouble. But the shooting range and the ball machine are really interesting. Shall we go play again tomorrow?" Fred asked enthusiastically, ignoring George's complaints. "Of course," George replied immediately, but then he smiled wryly. "But we have to go through that bastard hog to apply for the venue." "I almost forgot about that," Fred said, showing a constipated expression as he rested his chin on his arm. Despite their frowning faces, they finally decided to apply for the venue, thinking of the fun target practice. Harry and his friends continued to discuss the tactical training course with enthusiasm. However, during dinner, they noticed the senior students' gloomy faces, which made everyone uneasy. "Have you heard? The tactical training course for the 6th grade students this afternoon was terrifying." George and Fred sneaked up to Harry and his friends, whispering. "We were just about to ask why they look so miserable, as if they don't even have an appetite," Harry said, glancing at the senior students. "If you took the same class as them, you wouldn't be able to eat either. You might even have nightmares, George said, his eyes wide with a dramatic expression. Guess what they learned in today's class? What was it? Several young wizards leaned in, curious. George and Fred looked at each other, then put their hands to their mouths and said in unison, "An autopsy." An autopsy? Ron's face twisted in horror. Do you mean an autopsy? Literally? Can it be anything else? Fred said, emphasizing each word. It's exactly what it sounds like. I heard from the 6th graders that they were taken to a special room with all kinds of dead bodies. Yes, and not just wizards. There were dark magic creatures like trolls, vampires, and werewolves, George continued. Then the professor dissected the corpses one by one in front of them, explaining the cause of death and other details, Fred added, his voice filled with morbid fascination. The conversation around the table had taken a morbid turn. Fred was recounting the details of a recent lesson involving corpses, much to the dismay of his friends. It's disgusting. We're still eating. Don't talk about it anymore, Hermione said, shrinking back in fear. And why did the professor teach them these things? I heard that this is a compulsory course for becoming an Auror, Fred explained. Wizards who choose tactical training courses after the 5th grade are trained as backup Aurors, so the professor is actually teaching them Auror courses. That's right, George nodded. Aurors often visit crime scenes to collect intelligence and evidence. There are many secrets hidden in corpses. And understanding the injuries on a corpse is crucial for identifying the type of spell used by the murderer, Fred added mysteriously. I heard that the 6th graders were about to vomit just looking at the corpses today. They saw all kinds of death methods faced by wizards, burned, electrocuted, killed by the killing curse, rotted by strong acid, and even shattered by the explosive curse. Ugh! The 4 listeners recoiled in disgust. Harry put down the half-eaten chicken leg in his hand, his appetite thoroughly ruined. Hey, the reaction of those 6th graders was actually similar to yours, George said, covering his mouth to stifle a laugh. They say they want to throw up when they see meat now. You should have seen their expressions. It was hilarious. You guys are still in the mood to joke? Don't you feel disgusted? Hermione asked, looking at the twins incredulously. We already vomited, Fred shrugged indifferently. Honestly, I feel much better after throwing up once. Yes, but we couldn't be the only ones to experience such a wonderful feeling. Why do you think we told you all the details? George said with a smirk. End of this chapter. Chapter 649. Anecdote. Facing the mischievous antics of the Weasley twins, Harry and the others were so put off that they couldn't even finish their dinner. However, after a few days of interaction, everyone gradually gained a deeper understanding of Professor Anduin. This new professor tailored his teaching methods to suit students of different grades, always aiming to teach according to their individual needs. Hermione, in particular, had taken the time to summarize Anduin's general teaching patterns. For 1st and 2nd year students, who had weaker physiques and spellcasting abilities, Anduin was very lenient. The course content for these grades was similar, but the 2nd year students progressed much faster. They were introduced to delay training in their first class, and also had balance and reaction training incorporated into their lessons. Balance training involved walking on moving balance beams and stakes, which were seen in training room number 1. The sophomores had to navigate these unstable apparatuses to practice their sense of balance. Reaction training required students to pass through a phalanx filled with swinging sandbags, often leaving them with bruised noses and faces. Harry felt sympathy for the 2nd year students, who seemed to have a tough time. For students in grades 3 to 5, the courses were more rigorous, gradually introducing tactical training. The 4th and 5th grades progressed faster than the 3rd. For instance, in their first class, 5th year students practiced basic spellcasting postures, target shooting, and parrying, along with basic steps and moving target training. It was said that 5th graders would soon have to move and cast spells simultaneously, a challenge even for George and his peers. Senior students in grades 6 and 7 faced even more intense courses, sometimes involving the use of cadavers. Anduin also taught them first aid, detoxification, tracking, and investigation. Compared to the lower grades, Hermione observed that the upper grades had richer theoretical classes with less emphasis on physical training. So, do you think our next tactical training course might include content from the first class of the second grade? Harry asked curiously as a group of young wizards made their way to the central courtyard for their flying lesson. That's right, Hermione nodded confidently. The tactical training course is newly established at Hogwarts. I think the professor will only arrange the preset schedule content for us freshmen. The higher the grade, the more compact and intense the curriculum might become. Isn't the professor worried that senior students won't be able to keep up? Ron scratched his head, puzzled. Like Percy, they have to learn twice as much as George in one class. Exactly. I heard that fifth graders still have to take the OWL Ordinary Wizarding Level exam. Their study pressure is already high. What about the OL exam for tactical training? Neville added, having learned a lot in just a few days at school. I don't know about that, Hermione admitted. But I heard that the OWL test standard for tactical training was set by Professor Wilson. He must have his own ideas. The professor not only teaches, but also acts as an invigilator. Doesn't he have too much power? What if he cheats for personal gain? Ron still hadn't given up on the idea of getting Anduin to give him an easy pass. Unlikely, Hermione replied, shaking her head. Have you noticed how strict the professor is with everyone? Harry wasn't as naive as Ron. That's right. I think the professor won't lower the standards. He might even make them more stringent. Percy has been running to the playground for practice these past 2 days. When he's not on the shooting range, he's in the shooting room. He's totally exhausted, Hermione nodded approvingly. Over the past few days, the little wizards had given nicknames to the training rooms on the playground. The juniors often went to training room number 1, which they called the exercise room. Training room number 6 was called the batting row. Initially, they wanted to call it the gun room, but it felt a bit odd, so they changed it. Who made that study freak think about getting 12 certificates like Bill? Oh no, now it's 13, Ron said helplessly, then looked at Hermione. You don't want to be like him, do you, learning man number 1? No one will think you're dumb if you don't speak. Hermione glared at Ron coldly and then punched him hard. I think Percy's ideas are fine. At least he has his own goals. You are all brothers, and you don't know how to learn from him. It hurts. Ron rubbed his shoulder in pain. Who wants to be like him and make themselves so tired? And why did your strength suddenly become so great? Is it? Hermione looked at her right hand suspiciously. After thinking about it, she realized her physique seemed much better than before. That's because our dinner yesterday was a whole meal of ream beef, Neville interjected. The effect is obvious for people who eat the meat of magical animals for the first few times, and our daily exercise helps absorb it. It's normal for physical fitness to skyrocket. Magic animal meat? Now that you mention it, our dinner yesterday did seem different, Ron exclaimed suddenly. Neville, you seem very familiar with magical animal meat, and you know so much about its effects. Harry was surprised to learn that last night's dinner was special. Well, I used to eat it at Uncle Wilson's. He would occasionally mention the effects of these special ingredients on people. Neville smiled honestly, not thinking it was anything special. Do you eat it often? Hermione and Harry smacked their lips enviously. These children, who lived in Muggle families, had never eaten food made from magical animal meat. But it was also because of this that these foods were so effective on them. Potter! While they were chatting, a familiar but somewhat annoying voice suddenly came from the side. When they looked back, they found it was Malfoy. What? What are you doing here? You actually came over to talk to us? Ron looked at Malfoy with displeasure. Humph, I didn't come here to argue with you today. Malfoy gave Ron a supercilious look and then addressed everyone with a serious face. Have you heard about the boat at the foot of the mountain? The boat at the foot of the mountain? You mean the boat that Professor Wilson parked in the Black Lake? Harry realized what Malfoy was talking about. Since the opening ceremony, everyone had noticed a capsized 3-masted boat parked in the Black Lake. The freshmen immediately recognized it as the one that had emerged from the sea of clouds, riding thunder and lightning. After many inquiries, they learned that the boat belonged to Anduin, which naturally aroused everyone's curiosity. However, because the boat was docked at the foot of the mountain, everyone was exhausted from drills and didn't have time to visit. Moreover, ever since the ship docked in the Black Lake, strange things had been happening at Hogwarts at night. For example, there were rumors of melodious singing coming from the direction of the ship, and some people, from a distance, they could see figures appearing on the ship. A strange figure stood out. "Not bad," Malfoy said with a smug expression. "That ship stopped above our common room, so we could clearly see its bottom. Guess what happened on that ship last night?" "What happened?" Even Ron's eyes widened with curiosity. "I stayed up late last night and noticed a golden light from the legendary props appearing on that ship." Malfoy's eyes widened with excitement. "You've also opened legendary props from the blind box, so you should know what I'm referring to." "Legendary props!" Harry and Ron exchanged excited glances, but quickly calmed down. "And then? Is it just glowing?" "That's Professor Wilson's ship. It's said that the legendary props were originally his work, so it's normal for similar light to appear." "No, that's not what I want to say." Malfoy shook his head triumphantly. "I saw clearly yesterday that a person appeared on the boat, and I'm sure that person was definitely not the professor. That person sent the legendary item to someone on the shore. It's absolutely true." "Really?" Ron looked at Malfoy eagerly, but remained skeptical. "You're not lying, are you? How could there be such a coincidence that you ran into it?" "What I said is true." Malfoy blushed with excitement and then lowered his voice deliberately. "Because I also recognize the person who accepted the legendary item." "Who is it?" Harry and the others immediately believed Malfoy's earnest expression. "That's Gemma Farley, the 7th grade prefect of our college." Malfoy glanced around mysteriously, ensuring no one else heard him. "After seeing that scene last night, I was so excited that I stayed very late in the common room. Then I saw Senior Sister Farley come back from outside, and she did have an extra prop on her, a brooch with a unique shape. That may also be decorations bought by others. Don't you have too much imagination?" Hermione looked at Malfoy with disbelief. "It's absolutely true, Potter," Malfoy said firmly. "Legendary props can be seen with the naked eye. Especially for those of us who own legendary props, you should know that feeling." End of this chapter. Chapter 650. Promise. Seeking monthly ticket recommendations. Hearing what Malfoy said, Harry couldn't help but nod in agreement. Although his shining looked like a pendant on the outside, it had a unique aura, and it was visibly different from other decorations. But what does that mean? Harry still didn't understand what Malfoy was trying to convey. "Why can't you figure out such a simple thing?" Malfoy said, his eyes bright with excitement. "Those who visit that ship may be rewarded with legendary items." "What?" Everyone looked at each other, bewildered, as if Malfoy had lost his mind. "Your brain must have been gnawed by a rat. It's not so easy to get a legendary item. Maybe the professor gave that item to Sister Farley," Ron said, wanting to check Malfoy's forehead for a fever. "I've already told you, it's not the professor who gave the item to Sister Farley. The professor's reach isn't that long," Malfoy argued vigorously. "And haven't you heard the rumor? The boat seems to be alive." "Alive? What are you talking about? How could there be a living boat in this world?" Hermione rolled her eyes in disbelief. "No, it's indeed possible," Ron countered. "Did you forget the Sorting Hat? It's alive too." "Indeed, if it's Uncle Wilson, it is possible to create a living object. I've seen a talking human-shaped stake in his house," Neville added. Hermione's eyes widened in surprise. The concept of living objects had a significant impact on a Muggle-born wizard like her. Despite reading many books, she had never heard of such things. "Yes," Malfoy affirmed. "I overheard Dean Snape complaining about that ship, saying it was so bad-tempered that it wouldn't even let him get close." "So, you mean that the legendary item was actually awarded to Senior Sister Farley by that ship for some reason?" Harry began to understand. "Yeah," Malfoy nodded. "Haven't you heard the stories of phoenixes and unicorns? After being recognized by magical creatures like them, you can receive blessings and rewards. I guess the same goes for the boat. As long as you can please it, anything is possible. Isn't your imagination a bit too wild? And how can you be sure that the boat will acknowledge you?" Hermione asked, realizing that Malfoy was probably planning to approach the boat. "How do you know if you don't try?" Malfoy said, then turned to Harry. "You and I both have legendary items, which proves that we are special. Why don't you come with me tonight to find out? Maybe we can get a second legendary item." Ever since he got the fairy wand, Malfoy felt that he was the chosen one. He sought out Harry, not because of their good relationship, but because Harry also had a legendary item. In Malfoy's eyes, this meant that Harry had an inexplicable fate with legendary items, which might increase their chances of success. Of course, due to their cooperation in the previous tactical training course, Malfoy had subconsciously reduced his dislike for Harry and his friends, though he would never admit it. But isn't this a bit too risky? Harry's expression was conflicted. If you want to contact that ship based on your imagination, what if it has a bad temper and gets angry at us? Besides, it's against school rules for lower-grade students to be out after 8 o'clock at night. If we get caught, not only will points be deducted, but we'll also have violation records. I advise you to dismiss this foolish idea. Regarding the boat, I think it might be more appropriate to ask Professor Wilson directly, Hermione strongly objected. "Hutch, I didn't expect the Harry Potter to be such a coward," Malfoy sneered, glancing at the group with disdain. "Anyway, I'm definitely going to find out. The opportunity to obtain legendary items is right in front of us. If you don't want to fight for it, that's fine, but don't drool enviously when you see me with a new item." "Who said we were scared?" Ron interrupted before Harry could respond. "We'll go, but you'd better be honest with us. If you try any tricks, we won't spare you. After all, we still have Neville." Ron nudged Neville, who cracked his knuckles menacingly. "Whoever lies is a flobberworm," Malfoy retorted stiffly, though he swallowed nervously at the sight of Neville's sturdy frame. After a week of getting to know each other, the freshmen had formed some impressions. Neville was known for his strength and calm demeanor, especially during morning exercises. He could even keep up with the seniors on the running course. Malfoy, itching for adventure but wary of Neville, didn't want to provoke him. "All right, whoever breaks the appointment will be the flobberworm," Ron agreed loudly. They set a meeting time with Malfoy at the dock for 10:30 that evening. "Are you crazy?" Hermione exclaimed after Malfoy left. "You actually believe his nonsense? Or are fools' brains contagious?" "That's a legendary item," Ron replied, eyes gleaming with excitement. "No matter how small the chance, why not go for it if you have the opportunity?" "But night tours are against the rules," Hermione insisted. "If you get caught and lose points, it will hurt Gryffindor's chances in the House Cup." "It seems our house hasn't won the House Cup in years. Even without losing points, George and Fred alone could ruin our chances," Ron admitted. "And this is just a night tour. George and Fred have done it more than once. Maybe we can ask them for tips." "Oh my God!" Hermione shook her head in exasperation, then turned to Harry. "Don't you think this is stupid, risking everything for a baseless rumor?" "But I'm actually a little tempted," Harry admitted with an awkward smile. "To be honest, legendary items are very tempting. My The Shining saved me once. If there's a chance to get another one, it seems worth taking a little risk." Adventurousness ran in the blood of these Gryffindor students, and even Harry didn't see a problem with breaking school rules. "That's right," Ron chimed in. "I still don't have any legendary items. If what Malfoy said is true, then we'll benefit from it." Hermione felt exasperated and turned to Neville for support. In her mind, Neville was the most sensible. "If you all want to go, I'll come and help," Neville said. "If things go wrong, I can contact Uncle Wilson. He gave me a legendary item too." He revealed a metal belt buckle carved with a lion. "You even have a legendary item? Uncle Wilson is really generous," Ron said enviously, his resolve to join the night tour strengthening. Hermione, watching the others, was at a loss for words. Even Neville wanted to join in. Could legendary items really be that attractive? She had visited Silver Flash Trading Company, but was more fascinated by the magic lamps and gramophones than the so-called blind boxes. To her, those items seemed as deceitful as lottery tickets in the Muggle world. However, the other three were already captivated by the allure of legendary items. The students chatted excitedly about their own or others' legendary props as they made their way into the central courtyard. Hermione, feeling somewhat exasperated, followed them, unable to comprehend what was going on in the minds of these boys. Soon, the freshmen experienced their first flying lessons, and the magic of the broomstick captivated Harry. His natural talent for flying quickly became evident. In the entire class, Harry was the first to master controlling the flying broomstick, aside from Malfoy and Ron. However, Malfoy and Ron, having grown up in wizarding families, were already familiar with broomsticks and Quidditch before starting school, giving them a certain advantage. Harry, on the other hand, was starting from scratch. The flight lesson was a joyous occasion for Harry and his classmates, with an unexpected twist. Their roommate, Seamus, brought out a few colorful balls from the last tactical training course and suggested they throw them at each other while practicing flying. During this playful chaos, Harry's exceptional broomstick control caught the attention of Professor McGonagall, who was observing from her office. After class, an excited and sligging, nervous, Harry was taken aside by Professor McGonagall. She introduced him to Oliver Wood, the captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team, and recommended Harry join the team as a seeker, despite being a freshman. This decision was partly out of necessity, as Gryffindor's previous best seeker, Ron's older brother Charlie, had just graduated, leaving the team in need of new talent. Professor McGonagall, a Quidditch enthusiast and former player herself, had a personal connection to the sport. In her final year at Hogwarts, she had suffered a serious injury during a match against Slytherin due to a malicious foul, resulting in a fall that left her unconscious and with a broken rib. End of this chapter. Chapter 651, The Well of the Abyss. Professor McGonagall had always hoped to see Slytherin defeated by Gryffindor. A few years ago, they had an excellent seeker in Charlie, and their chances seemed promising. However, Anduin's reforms had significantly strengthened Slytherin, including their Quidditch team, leading to Gryffindor's 6 consecutive years of defeat. Determined to change this, Professor McGonagall had been scouting for potential players within Gryffindor. This time, she found Harry. She witnessed Harry effortlessly dive 50 feet with remarkable agility and speed, making him an ideal candidate for Quidditch. Harry's arrival gave her hope, especially since Anduin did not show favoritism towards Slytherin. Despite only a few days passing, Professor McGonagall noticed the growth in Gryffindor's young lions. During dinner, Harry shared the news with Ron and a few others, mentioning that Wood wanted to keep it a secret. "It's really cool. You broke the school's record by being selected for Quidditch in the 1st grade. You're about to become the youngest player in Hogwarts." Ron whispered excitedly, unable to hide his admiration. "Since you have such good news, I don't think you should go looking for that ship tonight," Hermione muttered, still reluctant. "But maybe today is my lucky day?" Harry replied with a carefree smile. "And we've already promised Malfoy. If we back out, he'll definitely mock us. That guy teases everyone all day long. Why do you care what he thinks?" Hermione rolled her eyes. "And I'm not going to fool around with you." Hermione even considered telling a professor, worried that this prank might offend Professor Wilson. "If you don't want to go, then don't. We didn't beg you," Ron retorted, ignoring Hermione's threat. "This is a chance to find legendary props. Aren't you curious about that magical ship? It's said to be alive." "This." Hermione hesitated, clearly intrigued but also concerned. Harry suddenly had an idea. "Hey, didn't Malfoy say the ship is alive? Shouldn't we bring some gifts to please it?" "That makes sense. Harry, you're so smart." Ron's eyes lit up, but then he frowned. "But what would a ship like?" "If it's a ship with its own mind, it might like things beneficial to a ship, like bunker oil, iron anchors, hemp rope, planks, or decorations. But would it really think like a normal ship?" Hermione couldn't help but join the discussion despite her earlier reluctance. "See, you are interested in legendary props," Ron said, looking at Hermione knowingly. "But where can we find ship-related items at Hogwarts?" "What if we just bring candy?" Neville suggested. "No one knows if a living ship likes candy. I have plenty of snacks." Neville, being familiar with Anduin, had access to various imported snacks, and as the only child in the Longbottom family, he had saved more treats than Ron. "How can a ship love sugar? That sounds too weird," Harry said, finding Neville's suggestion far-fetched. "By the way, I saw a beautiful tapestry on the left side of the fourth-floor corridor, decorated with gold-threaded hemp ropes. Maybe that ship would like it, Hermione suggested. The group pondered Hermione's idea, realizing it might be their best option. They decided to gather the tapestry and other potential gifts, hoping to appease the legendary ship and uncover its secrets. Ron thought hard, then suddenly interjected, "Are you crazy?" Hermione couldn't help raising her voice in excitement. It's one thing to sneak out during curfew, but you want to steal Hogwarts property? If someone finds out, you might get expelled. I didn't say I wanted to steal it. We can just borrow the rope and buy another one later to replace it. Besides, that ship might not even accept the so-called gift, Ron said, muttering quickly as if he had thought everything through. But it's still not right, Hermione said, exasperated. The corridor on the right is the forbidden area that Principal Dumbledore warned us about at the start of the school year. If you accidentally go there, it could cause big problems. We don't have to go into the forbidden corridor. I think Ron's idea is great. Harry, never one to shy away from adventure, immediately supported Ron. Why even you? Hermione rolled her eyes anxiously, then turned away angrily, ignoring the three boys. But Harry, Ron, and Neville were enjoying their time, soon putting their heads together again to discuss their plan for the night. Time passed quickly, and soon it was 10 o'clock at night. The three boys were ready to go, planning to start their actions half an hour earlier to avoid missing the agreed time. As they sneaked out of the dormitory and walked out of the common room door, they found Hermione waiting for them. "What? You changed your mind and decided to join us?" Harry asked, smiling happily. "I'm here to stop you from doing something stupid. Malfoy's proposal is ridiculous. You don't really believe his nonsense, do you?" Hermione had thought long and hard, but still felt their actions were too reckless and could result in the school deducting points. "We're already out now. How can we back out? And don't you think night tours are cool?" George and Fred started sneaking around on their second day after entering school, Ron said nonchalantly. For him, taking risks was exciting, and the consequences didn't matter. Harry nodded in agreement. "If you don't want to come, go back to the lounge. We've already made up our minds." "Humph!" Hermione glared at them angrily and turned to return to the lounge, but found herself locked out. The fat lady had left her portrait. Is this a joke?" Hermione covered her head in despair, then looked at the three boys who were walking away. "This is really unlucky. I guess I have to follow them. If I stay here, I might get caught faster." Shaking her head in confusion, she ran to catch up with them. Seeing this, Harry, Ron, and Neville thought Hermione had finally changed her mind. To them, three people were no different from four. So the group of four followed their planned route to the fourth floor. But just as Harry and Ron were about to walk along the tapestry, they heard footsteps in the distance, accompanied by a faint light. "Oops, Filch must be on patrol," Ron whispered quickly. Panicking, they didn't have time to care about the tapestry and hurriedly ran in the opposite direction. Finally, they reached the end of the corridor on the right side of the fourth floor. But it was a dead end, except for a door next to it. They would be caught by Filch on the spot. In desperation, Harry tried to turn the handle of the door, but found it was locked, making them even more nervous. "Get out of the way! Alohomora!" Seeing the others panic, Hermione hurried forward, took out her wand, and cast an unlocking charm. The spell had an effect. The few people in front of them couldn't control their excitement and rushed in quickly. After locking the door, the sound of footsteps outside finally faded away, and everyone slowly let go of the tension in their hearts. At this moment, everyone began to look around the room. They found themselves in a huge circular space, completely different from what they had seen from the outside. It had clearly been expanded by the untraceable stretching curse, much like the training room they had seen before. The room appeared to be an ordinary stone chamber, dark and humid, except for one striking feature. On the wall opposite the entrance stood a stone knight holding swords in both hands. Merlin's beard. "What is this place? Why does it look so eerie?" Ron swallowed nervously. "I don't know," Hermione replied, shaking her head in confusion. Then a thought struck her. Could this be the restricted area that Professor Dumbledore mentioned? I think we should leave quickly before anything bad happens. The others nodded in agreement. The place did indeed seem too strange and foreboding. Buzz! Before they could take any action, a sudden roar echoed through the room. Everyone's eyes turned to the stone knight, whose eyes had suddenly lit up with two blue lights, staring at them with an icy gaze. Intruder detected, activating the first level of the Well of the Abyss. Buzz! Intruder detected, dungeon incomplete, trespassers marked as intruders, deploying first layer of guards. The cold, emotionless voice emanated from the stone knight. As it finished speaking, its eyes changed from dark blue to a menacing scarlet. The four of them watched in horror as the rocky ceiling above their heads began to crack, opening up into a huge gap. End of this chapter. Chapter 652, Mr. Ship. With the ceiling above them cracking, everyone saw a huge black shadow suddenly fall, flashing before their eyes. As they focused, they realized it was a massive animal with sticky saliva dripping from its mouth, a three-headed giant dog. After the giant dog landed, it shook its heads as if waking from a dream. It soon noticed the four people at the door. The giant dog glared at them with its 6 eyes, staring viciously at Harry and the others. With a loud roar, it charged towards them, seemingly intent on tearing them apart instantly. Ah! The four of them stared in shock at the sudden appearance of the three-headed dog. Seeing its aggressive movements, they cried out in unison. Run! Without hesitation, they pushed open the entrance door and rushed out desperately. Fortunately, they hadn't ventured deep into the room, otherwise the consequences could have been disastrous. After finally escaping and locking the door with all their strength, they looked at each other, still shaken. What the hell was that? Ron's legs were trembling with fear, thinking he had narrowly escaped death. I don't know. Why would they lock such a terrifying monster in the school? Neville leaned against the wooden door, cold sweat dripping down his face. It's all your fault. If you weren't thinking about legendary items, we wouldn't have encountered this. Hermione scolded the others. But we didn't want this either. Who knew Filch would appear suddenly, and you opened that door? Ron retorted, still embarrassed but defensive. Let's just go back now. Did you see how scary that monster was? Hermione sighed, urging them to return. Go back to the common room like this? We haven't even seen that ship yet, Harry muttered, still curious. Are you still thinking about that? Hermione looked at Harry incredulously. The recent experience was enough to give them nightmares, yet he was still thinking about something else? Although we were scared by that monster, we're safe, aren't we? Ron chimed in, the allure of the legendary item making him forget the recent fright. You are so unreasonable, Hermione rolled her eyes. Harry and Ron had clearly made up their minds, and Neville, despite his fear, expressed his loyalty and willingness to continue. Realizing she couldn't sway them, Hermione reluctantly agreed to continue. After successfully bypassing Filch and coming downstairs, they couldn't help but discuss the room they had entered by mistake. What do you think that room is for? It was obviously specially arranged, and the stone statue could even talk, Ron asked, looking specifically at Hermione, whom he considered the most insightful. Didn't you hear the stone statue shouting at us? It called us intruders. There must be some special purpose for that room, Hermione pondered. By the way, did you notice the circular stone slab in the middle of the room? It looked like it could move, like a door or a well. A well? Harry exclaimed. That's right. Didn't the stone sculpture mention the Well of the Abyss? Doesn't that represent that place? But why would they make a well in the school and place such a terrifying monster on it? Neville was still full of doubts. Didn't you hear the stone sculpture say put in the first? Remember the layer of guards? Hermione, with her sharp memory, reminded them. Maybe that monster is there to guard something important. Otherwise, why call it a guard? Does that mean there are several other floors below that well? Harry's eyes widened in shock. Oh my God, if the guards on the first floor are so terrifying, how much worse must it be below? No wonder Principal Dumbledore set it as a forbidden area. Let alone students. I don't think even a professor would dare venture there. Neville shook his head in amazement, still haunted by the image of the ferocious three-headed dog. Professor? Do you think Professor Wilson created that room? Hermione suddenly speculated, as if struck by inspiration. Don't tell me. It's really possible. That stone sculpture looks like an alchemy tool, and no one else at Hogwarts seems to have that ability, Ron affirmed Hermione's idea. Then if we go to find Professor Wilson's boat now, aren't we walking into a trap? Hermione stopped abruptly, and the other three exchanged worried glances, realizing the potential danger. Just as they stood there hesitating, a voice suddenly came from the side. Why so slow? If you don't come soon, I'm ready to go by myself. Malfoy poked his head out from behind a stone pillar near the vestibule, looking at them with a complaining expression. It was only then that Harry and the others realized they had unknowingly walked out of Hogwarts Castle and arrived at the place where they participated in morning exercises every day. Just a little further, there was the cliff staircase leading to the dock. Shh! We have to keep what happened just now a secret, Hermione whispered urgently to everyone after seeing Malfoy. Okay. Although Harry, Ron, and Neville were young, they were not fools, and they nodded in agreement immediately. Malfoy, looking very impatient, stepped out. What are you muttering about? Are you still going to find that spaceship? It's bad enough you came late, and now you're dragging your feet. Are you coming alone? Harry asked, puzzled. Malfoy was usually accompanied by his two companions. He thought Malfoy would have called his friends along. Those idiots? Even if they came, it wouldn't make much difference. Only the elite, like me and you, Potter, matter. The rest are just there to join in the fun, Malfoy said, pointing at himself and then at Harry, completely ignoring the others. You bastard! Ron was furious at Malfoy's arrogance, but before he could react, Neville stopped him. Stop talking nonsense. Let's go down quickly. I don't know if what you said is true or not, Harry said, feeling annoyed at Malfoy's attitude. Oh, now you remember to hurry. Where were you just now? Malfoy sneered, then walked back to the stone pillar where he had been hiding and took out a neatly folded blanket. Seeing the curious looks from Harry and the others, Malfoy asked in surprise, No, don't you all know to prepare some gifts? We're going to meet that Mr. Ship next? Harry and the others exchanged embarrassed glances. They had wanted to prepare presents, but the unexpected situation on the fourth floor had left them no time. However, Neville reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of candies. Who said we don't have any? Isn't this something? Ha ha! Malfoy laughed heartily. Are you kidding me? You brought a bunch of candy? No way. I'll die of laughter. Who knows what that Mr. Ship likes? What if he likes candy? Ron retorted, then asked curiously, What is it you have in your hand? Did you prepare a special gift before going to school? Heh, I'm not as knowledgeable as you, Malfoy replied, raising his chin proudly. The tapestry in my hand has a lot of history. It's a treasure from our Slytherin house. I managed to take it from the common room today. Harry and the others were taken aback by Malfoy's words. They hadn't expected him to have the same idea as them, even going so far as to take something from his own house. Hermione, too, was speechless, wondering why all these boys were so sneaky. Weren't they afraid of getting caught stealing from the school? Despite their brief struggle with the situation, the five of them quickly made their way to the foot of the mountain. They were eager to see the legendary artifact. Even Hermione, usually so rational, felt a strong curiosity about the so-called living ship. As they approached the dock at the foot of the mountain, the boat anchored in the Black Lake gradually came into view. Even in the middle of the night, the surface of the peculiar three-masted sailing ship glowed with a faint blue light. The light seemed to pulse like the breathing of a living creature, making everyone feel as if the ship truly had life. However, the eerie glow also cast a gloomy atmosphere over the Enthralling dock, giving the scene a ghostly appearance. The closer they got, the more they felt a chill of fear. Instinctively, the five of them huddled closer together, as if trying to ward off the fear that was creeping into their hearts. Even Malfoy, who had been so confident earlier, now felt a twinge of unease. How could this ship look so much like a ghost ship? It hadn't seemed this way from a distance. End of this chapter. Chapter 653. The Mysterious Ship. As they drew closer to the ship, the tension among the group grew palpable. Each step seemed to echo louder in the stillness of the night. Look, Ron, who had moved ahead, suddenly pointed towards the ship, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. Do you see that? Following Ron's gaze, everyone noticed the eerie sight before them. The ship, which had appeared serene from a distance, now revealed its true nature. The intertwined cables on the deck twisted and writhed like living creatures, illuminated by the faint, undulating glow of the moonlight. The scene was unsettling, almost nightmarish. Hermione, who had been skeptical until now, finally understood what the others had been talking about. This ship was indeed alive, but its presence was anything but welcoming. It felt like a predator lying in wait, ready to pounce. Instinctively, Hermione took a few steps back, only to realize that her companions had done the same. They were all equally unnerved by the sight. "So these are the unicorns and phoenixes you mentioned?" Harry asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He turned to Malfoy, his eyes wide with apprehension. "You were the one who insisted we come here. Shouldn't you be the first to approach?" "That's right," Ron added, giving Malfoy a gentle push. "Go on, see if this Mr. Ship is as friendly as you claimed." Despite the fear gripping him, Malfoy's pride wouldn't allow him to back down. Summoning all his courage, he took a few tentative steps forward. When nothing happened, he continued, trying to reassure himself with each step. "Hello, Mr. Ship," Malfoy called out nervously as he approached within 10 meters of the vessel. At that moment, a strange noise emanated from the ship. It sounded like wooden boards rubbing and creaking against each other. The ropes on the deck became more animated, as if the ship had been roused from slumber and was now stretching its limbs. Malfoy, who was closest, felt his legs turn to jelly. He wanted to flee, but couldn't bring himself to do something so cowardly. His pride kept him rooted to the spot. "Who is there?" A deep, murky voice echoed from the ship, making it impossible to discern the speaker's gender or age. Hearing the ship speak calmed Malfoy slightly. The unknown was always more terrifying, and now that the ship had responded, it at least indicated the possibility of communication. "Hello, Mr. Ship," Malfoy began, trying to sound composed. "I am Draco Malfoy from Slytherin House. I apologize for disturbing you at this late hour." "Mr. Ship, disrespectful visitor, who told you that I am a man?" The ship's voice grew louder, filled with anger and indignation. "I'm so sorry," Malfoy stammered, realizing his mistake. He had assumed the ship's gender based on a figure he had seen the previous night, which had appeared feminine. Could that figure have a special connection to the ship? Malfoy cursed himself for his blunder. The group stood in tense silence, waiting to see how the ship would respond to Malfoy's apology. Malfoy felt a pang of anxiety in his heart, but forced a grin. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to offend you. Explain your purpose. Why did you wake me up for no reason, young man?" The sailboat in front of him spoke with a tone of dissatisfaction, as if it had just been rudely awakened. "Please forgive me. I express my apologies to you again." Malfoy bowed respectfully. "I am a student of Professor Wilson, and I came here today to pay tribute to you. If I can take this opportunity to get acquainted with a beautiful boat, it would be my honor." Malfoy didn't dare to reveal that he was here to ask for legendary items, so he spoke respectfully and held up the tapestry in his hand. "This is a gift I specially prepared for you. I hope you like it." "Isn't it beautiful?" The sailboat ignored Malfoy's gift and instead focused on his compliment. "All right, sweet-talking boy, I accept your gift. But if you can talk, say a few more words. Besides being beautiful, what else do you see in me?" The sailboat extended 2 long hemp ropes, took the tapestry from Malfoy's hand, and then muttered sullenly. "And those little brats next to you, you all came together, right? Why do you hide so far away? Do you think I'm scary?" "It doesn't mean that. We're just afraid of disturbing you." After being called out by the sailboat, Harry and the others, who had been hiding behind, immediately stepped forward. Harry even apologized repeatedly. They realized that although the sailboat looked a bit gloomy, it seemed quite talkative. Seeing that the sailboat accepted Malfoy's gift, they thought there might be a chance to get the legendary items from it. They were no longer as scared as before, and were eager to try. Even Hermione looked at the sailboat with bright eyes. But from what the sailboat said, it seemed to want everyone to praise it a bit more. This request felt strange to them. "You." The sailboat pointed a hemp rope at Ron among the crowd. "Tell me, what do you think of me?" You look big." Ron was caught off guard by being singled out and blurted out the first thing that came to mind. But as soon as he said it, he regretted it. What kind of compliment was big? It sounded like nonsense. What? The sailboat's wooden boards creaked louder, and the cables danced wildly as if irritated. Are you saying I'm fat? Damn boy, I'll throw you into the Black Lake right now to be with that big squid in the water. Yes, I'm sorry. Ron stammered nervously. I didn't mean that, really. Yes, Miss Ship. Hermione immediately stepped in to smooth things over. He actually meant to say that you are tall and straight, giving off a majestic and solemn feeling, right, Ron? She nudged Ron with her arm. Ron quickly caught on and nodded vigorously. Yes, that's what I meant. I just couldn't express myself clearly. Humph, you're smart. The sailboat calmed down a bit after hearing their explanations. But I don't like stupid boys. Ron sighed in relief, realizing he wouldn't be thrown into the lake. However, he felt frustrated, thinking he might not get a share of the legendary item. The sailboat then pointed at Hermione with a cable. You were quite witty just now. Now, tell me what you think. Hermione perked up, and after a moment's thought, blurted out, When I saw you, I was captivated by your exquisite and charming figure. Your deck is as smooth as silk under the moonlight. If Merlin himself saw you, he would probably be in awe. Heh, not bad. The sailboat trembled after hearing Hermione's praise, or perhaps it was the cable that trembled. You little witch have a sweet mouth, much more pleasing than the two little devils before you. If you don't want to leave, stay and talk a little more. If you make me happy, you'll benefit from it. Thank you, Miss Boat, Hermione exclaimed excitedly. She hadn't expected that her few words would be so effective. And did the sailboat just mention benefits? Could it be a legendary item? Hermione, who had been the most skeptical, was now the first to see hope. The people around her immediately became excited upon hearing the sailboat's words. It seemed that what Malfoy had said earlier was true. They didn't need gifts to please the boat, just a sweet tongue. However, Malfoy felt a pang of anxiety. He had been the first to arrive and had even brought a gift, yet now this Muggle-born girl had seized the opportunity. It was infuriating, but he dared not speak rashly. Malfoy realized that this ship was like a narcissist. It seemed to only want to hear praise. Interrupting now might only anger it. Next, it's your turn. The sailboat shook its cable, like a little girl wagging her fingers, and finally pointed at Harry among the crowd. Me? Harry asked, suddenly nervous. You. You look so beautiful. Prettier than any boat I've ever seen before, really. Harry didn't know as many words as Hermione, and his difficult life had left him with limited knowledge, so he could only speak honestly. The sailboat was indeed the most beautiful boat he had ever seen. Of course, Harry hadn't seen many boats in his life, so he wasn't lying. End of this chapter. Chapter 654, Captain Leona. Beautiful? Is that all there is? The sailboat seemed a bit dissatisfied after hearing Harry's compliment. Although you are sincere, your answer is too mediocre, so just stay. With that, the sailboat anthropomorphically threw up its cable and made a slight backward movement, clearly showing its disapproval of Harry. Harry, though a bit disappointed, didn't seem too upset. He had come here mainly to try his luck and learn something new. The mere experience of seeing a living ship and chatting with it was a novelty in itself. Malfoy, standing next to Harry, felt a bit relieved seeing that Harry wasn't favored by the sailboat. After all, they both possessed legendary items, and if Harry had been chosen, it would have made Malfoy feel a bit embarrassed. However, Malfoy was also annoyed. He had thought that he and Harry, both with legendary items, were special. But it turned out that the sailboat's preference depended on who had the sweetest words. He glanced at the sailboat resentfully, thinking, why does this ship seem so unreliable? I even gave it a gift. Boy, what are you looking at? Don't think I didn't see you. Is it itchy? The sailboat noticed Malfoy's little movement and swung its cable in the air with a crackling sound. Sorry, Miss Boat, I didn't mean anything by it. Malfoy quickly apologized, realizing he had offended the sailboat. He didn't want to provoke this terrifying entity. Humph, if it weren't for the gift you gave me, I'd make sure you couldn't eat or walk around. The sailboat retorted coldly, then pointed its cable at Neville, the last one in line. Boy, it's your turn now. Say something nice to make me happy. Neville scratched his head in embarrassment. Sorry, I'm not very good at complimenting people, but I brought candy. Do you want some? Neville had come along just for fun and hadn't expected to gain anything from the sailboat. He simply took out the candy he had prepared earlier and offered it with a smile. You can't even compliment others. How will you find a wife in the future? The sailboat smacked its lips, a bit bored. But candy is good. Let me see. A cable extended from the sailboat and randomly picked and pulled at the candies Neville was holding. Then, it smiled excitedly. I didn't expect you to bring moonlight toffee. This is my favorite flavor. Anduin never lets me eat more. Do you have more? The sailboat used the fluffy part of the hemp rope to pinch 2 pieces of moonlight toffee and even patted Neville on the head as a compliment. Yes, Neville replied indifferently. I have 2 big boxes of moonlight toffee. I can give you all if you want. Okay. The sailboat dangled its cable happily. Bring them to me tomorrow, and I'll invite you on board to play, or I can bring you up now. Toffee? The others, except Neville, looked at the sailboat in astonishment. They hadn't expected that the sailboat's favorite person would be Neville, just because he had candy. It was too outrageous. And wasn't it a ship? Could it even eat? A very absurd thought suddenly appeared in everyone's minds, especially Malfoy's. He felt his worldview collapsing. How could there be such an unsophisticated boat? This was completely inconsistent with the grandeur it had shown earlier. As everyone kept complaining in their hearts, the sailboat suddenly underwent a new change. The blue light on the sailboat shone instantly, then gradually dimmed, but it didn't go out abruptly like a light. It felt like the ebbing tide. Blue light slowly gathered from the outside to the inside, like flowing water, until it completely submerged into the hull. Once those eerie lights disappeared, the entire sailboat seemed to revert to an inanimate state, losing the agility it had displayed earlier. The wriggling cables and creaking wooden boards also returned to calm. Just as everyone was marveling at the sailboat's transformation, a light blue head suddenly appeared on the side of the boat, startling everyone. The blue figure didn't stop at just showing its head. It continued to emerge until the entire body was visible. It then turned over and sat on the edge of the boat with its legs crossed. As Harry and his friends settled down, they saw that the figure was a handsome young woman dressed in medieval male attire. She wore sturdy leather pants and boots, a wide and casual belt, a slightly wrinkled shirt, a tight jacket, and a weather-beaten tricorn hat. A cocked hat was pinned to her waist, along with a machete with a gauntlet on the handle. She looked like a medieval female captain, or perhaps a legendary pirate ship captain. Her appearance was somewhat similar to the ghosts at Hogwarts, but there were notable differences. Unlike ordinary ghosts, her body was not as transparent and appeared more solid, akin to Peeves. "Are you the boat lady from earlier?" Hermione asked uncertainly. "You have a good eye and a sweet mouth, little witch." The female captain replied in a clear voice, quite different from before. "I am Belliv Leona. You can call me Captain Leona, or just Leona, but please don't call me Mrs. Leona. My sister is still single." After teasing the group, Leona pushed aside the 2 moonlight toffees she had just received from Neville, threw them into her mouth, and chewed them happily. Seeing this, everyone was even more convinced that she was not an ordinary ghost. They had learned in their short time at school that most ghosts were incorporeal and couldn't touch real objects, let alone eat candy. The sudden transformation from boat to person left everyone at a loss for words. However, Leona's presence made them feel less restrained and fearful. A ghost-like humanoid creature was more acceptable than a living ship. "Why? Didn't you all have sweet mouths just now? Now you're all dumb?" Leona joked, glancing at them before turning her attention to Neville. "By the way, you didn't answer me. Do you want to come and play on Sister's boat?" "Me? Can I?" Neville asked, scratching his head in embarrassment. The transformation of the boat into a beautiful woman had made him blush shyly. "Heh, I didn't expect you to be so pure. Elder sister likes a strong and youthful young man like you," Leona said with a smile. She waved her hand lightly, and a cable extended from the boat, wrapping around Neville and pulling him to sit beside her. "Ah, this!" Neville was startled by Leona's sudden action. Sitting next to her, he straightened his body nervously. He was a little afraid of heights and shy, as it was the first time he had been so close to a girl. "Don't be nervous, little brother. I won't hurt you," Leona reassured him, putting her arm around his neck. My sister is still waiting for you to bring me sweets. Oh, Neville replied awkwardly, not knowing what else to say. Meanwhile, the others on the boat looked on, unsure of what to do next. At this moment, everyone came to their senses. Although Captain Leona was in a very peculiar state, her personality was clearly out of the ordinary. Miss Ship, Captain Leona, is this your real body? Is this ship just controlled by you? Or are you actually the ship itself? Hermione, brimming with curiosity, couldn't help but ask. Sweet-mouthed little girl, it's impolite to inquire about someone's details when you first meet them. Leona replied, not truly angry, but smiling warmly. But the questions you asked are actually all correct, and yet none of them are. Sorry. Hermione realized she might have overstepped and immediately apologized sincerely. It's okay. I'm usually a bit bored, so it's quite interesting to have someone to talk to once in a while, especially a cute kid with a sweet mouth like you. It's much better than some disgusting uncle with greasy hair, Leona said, playfully ruffling Neville's hair and pointedly glancing at someone. After Leona's comment, the image of Snape popped into everyone's minds. It was clear she was referring to their potions professor. This deepened everyone's impression of Leona. This ghostly big sister was a complete face-control narcissist, adding to her mysterious and weird aura. At this time, Malfoy hadn't forgotten about the legendary items he was thinking about. He couldn't help but ask, Captain Leona, were you the one who gave Senior Sister Farley the item last night? Last night? Leona tilted her head in thought, then nodded proudly. You mean that serious girl? Yes, I did give her an item yesterday. Why? Do you want one too? Malfoy was about to nod excitedly, but seeing the sly look in Leona's eyes, he immediately became more reserved. Can I? That depends on whether you know how to please me. Leona's eyes narrowed into crescent moons. Anyway, don't be like that bastard Anduin. He's obviously handsome, but he's always vicious and playing tricks on others for no reason. End of this chapter. Chapter 6 and 55, the first official meeting. Use your hands and feet? Could it be that Professor Wilson is actually a pervert? Hearing what Leona said, Harry and the others immediately lost their composure. Hermione even blushed in embarrassment. Seeing everyone's expressions, Leona covered her mouth and snickered slyly. Before Leona could continue teasing them, a cold voice suddenly interrupted. Don't scare people outside. Since they are here, let them come up. The group recognized Anduin's voice. It dawned on them that Professor Wilson had been on board the entire time, making everyone exchange embarrassed glances. Always ordering people around, Leona muttered, rolling her eyes in displeasure. Despite her grumbling, she snapped her fingers, and the sailboat lowered a wooden bridge. She smiled at everyone. What are you waiting for? Didn't you hear your professor calling you? Come up quickly. Leona then turned and climbed back onto the boat, dragging Neville along with her. The rest of the group, feeling a mix of nervousness and apprehension, followed obediently. They knew they had broken school rules by sneaking out at night, and were now caught by a professor known for his strictness. Once on the deck, they took in the full view of the ship. The deck of the three-masted sailing ship was vast, capable of holding hundreds of people without feeling crowded. The ship's facilities were simple. 3 masts, a smooth deck, and elevated sections at the front and back, connected by steps. The front elevation led to the rampart and a double door, while the rear elevation housed the rudder and 2 symmetrical single doors. The ship exuded a strong classical style, appearing well-maintained or recently refurbished. Let's go. Your professor is waiting in the captain's room. Ever since I met that guy, he has always occupied my sister's room. When you see him later, you have to help me scold that bastard, Leona complained as she led the group to a door at the back of the boat. Harry and the others could only smile awkwardly at Leona's complaint. They wouldn't dare criticize the professor. Entering the door, they found themselves in a spacious and bright corridor. Antique wall lamps adorned the walls, soft leather carpets covered the floor, and a faint fragrance of wood filled the air, adding to the boat's comfort and dignity. Wow, it's really beautiful inside, Ron said, stroking the solid wood grain on the wall and staring in awe at the exquisite decorations and wooden table in the corridor. Isn't this the latest magic gramophone from Silver Flash Trading Co.? I remember it's called Spring Castle. When the music starts playing, it shows the appearance of a castle, complete with figures and small animals, Malfoy noted, pointing to a decoration on a shelf. He knew the product well, having coveted it since its launch. Expensive, and his father was reluctant to buy it. This is Uncle Wilson's boat. It's not unusual for him to put a few of his own products on it, Ron said, curling his lips disdainfully. Besides, our family already has Spring Castle. I don't think it's that impressive. It's not as good as the Snow Country Returner released at Christmas. Damn nouveau rich. How would you know how to appreciate art? Malfoy retorted, glaring at Ron with dissatisfaction. He continued to mumble under his breath. The Malfoy family prided themselves on their nobility, but they often didn't get what they wanted. While the group bickered, chatted, and explored, Leona led them to the door of the captain's cabin, located directly under the stern of the ship. The wizards were in high spirits, so she wasn't particularly anxious. After opening the door and leading them inside, everyone felt as if they had discovered a new world. In front of them was a spacious area resembling a normal room, complete with a desk and a reception area. The style was similar to the corridor outside, classical and simple. However, the wall directly behind the office was a large floor-to-ceiling window, and the scene beyond it was astonishing. Instead of the expected view of the Black Lake behind the sailboat, there was a massive factory filled with various alchemy props. Describing it as a factory might seem demeaning. It was more like a huge treasure trove, museum, or exhibition hall. Through the windows, they could see the ceiling simulating a night sky, while the lower part remained brightly lit. Neatly arranged display stands filled the space, each holding a legendary prop. Harry was certain of it. He could tell with his naked eye that the objects on display were all legendary props similar to his The Shining. He wasn't the only one who noticed. Malfoy and Ron were immediately captivated by the view behind the windows, their eyes wide and mouths agape. Even Hermione, who didn't recognize the legendary items, was moved by the sight. Only Neville remained relatively calm, perhaps because he had seen enough legendary props with Anduin. Shortly after entering, he turned his attention to Anduin, who was sitting leisurely nearby. "Uncle Wilson," Neville called out with a smile, waving to him. His greeting snapped the others out of their daze, and they all turned to look. Malfoy and Ron even wiped their mouths in embarrassment, unable to help themselves earlier. "It's better to call me Professor, as you did at Hogwarts," Anduin said with a casual smile, gesturing to the sofa beside him. "Come and sit down. Don't just stand there." "Thank you, Professor," Neville replied, used to Anduin's gentle demeanor outside of training hours. He sat down on the sofa in the reception room without hesitation. Ron followed suit, seeing Anduin as a kind uncle who often brought gifts to their family, despite his favoritism towards Ginny. Harry, Hermione, and Malfoy, however, were more cautious. It was Harry's first time being so close to this legendary figure, especially in such a private setting. Hermione was flustered, remembering how they had broken school rules to go on a night excursion. Now, they were cornered in the office of the professor who always maintained a strict facade. It was hard to imagine how many points would be deducted in a short while. Malfoy was even more nervous. He had complicated feelings towards this professor. First of all, he was a loyal fan of Silver Flash Trading Company and even regarded their legendary props as sacred. This was evident from the way he cherished his fairy wand. Now, being able to get in touch with the creators of these legendary props up close was like a fan meeting a star they admire, filling him with anxiety. This was a completely different feeling from the usual classroom interactions. After noticing the different states of several people, Anduin nodded knowingly and then looked at Leona. "Go and rest first. It must be annoying to be woken up in the middle of the night." "Heh! Now you know how to care about others," Leona replied, giving Anduin a sidelong glance. "I was having a good chat with some brats, but you interrupted me." She then smiled and winked at Neville. "Little handsome guy, remember to bring candy for your sister." With that, she sank straight down into the floor beneath her feet. Seeing Leona tease his junior right in front of him, Anduin couldn't help but shake his head helplessly. He then looked at the group with a smile. "I'm sorry if Leona scared you. Although she has a bit of a bad personality, she's a nice person." Should I really bring her candy tomorrow? Neville asked, scratching his head in embarrassment. He was flustered by Leona's attention. That's between the two of you, and you already promised her, didn't you? Anduin replied with a noncommittal smile. Professor, you actually knew everything about us outside just now, didn't you? Hermione couldn't hold back any longer. She stood up and bowed immediately. Sorry, Professor. We didn't intentionally violate the school rules. It's our fault for disturbing Lady Leona and you. What she feared most now was that Anduin would deduct points from them because of this incident, especially since the Silver Flash talisman could record violation records, which would be a stain on their record. Oh? Anduin couldn't help but find the situation a bit amusing. Was he really that scary? He quickly changed his expression to a serious one and looked at Hermione. I can see that you are a well-behaved child. How about this? I will give you a chance to identify the mastermind of this night tour, and I can let you off the hook for this incident. Chapter 656, Gossip. Hearing what Anduin said, Hermione was overjoyed. She then looked at Harry and Ron beside her with a stern expression before shifting her gaze to Malfoy. Anduin's sudden change in demeanor made the rest of the young wizards nervous. Ron, in particular, wanted to argue but was quickly silenced by Anduin's cold stare. Seeing this, the four of them could only look at Hermione with some trepidation, hoping she wouldn't identify them, especially Ron and Malfoy, who were from the same school and had been humiliated by her before. Sorry, Professor, our night tour was a decision we made together, Hermione said after struggling internally for a long time. She had initially wanted to report the others as soon as they were caught, but when the moment came, she couldn't bring herself to do it. Despite the short duration of their adventure, they had faced it together, and Hermione couldn't bear to betray them. After hearing Hermione's words, the other four couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, looking at her with grateful eyes. Ron and Malfoy, in particular, were surprised by Hermione's loyalty at such a critical moment. What about you? I'll give you a chance too, Anduin said, turning his gaze to Harry. Me? We did make the decision together. There is no so-called mastermind, Harry replied firmly without hesitation. After hearing two people say the same thing, Anduin looked at Malfoy. What about you? I can give you one last chance. Seeing Anduin ask Malfoy, the group became nervous again. Malfoy and the Gryffindors were not on the same side, and everyone was prepared for him to retaliate. This night excursion, Malfoy glanced at the others, then gritted his teeth. I actually proposed this night tour to everyone. If you want to talk about the mastermind, it must be me. Oh? Anduin looked at him in surprise. Malfoy, it's beyond my expectation that you are so frank. Not only Anduin, but the rest of them were also very surprised by Malfoy's words. Why did this guy suddenly become so righteous? Not only did he not blame them, but he even took the initiative to take the blame. Malfoy had initially intended to blame the others, as it was the best choice to protect himself. But when he saw that Muggle-born Hermione and Harry didn't backstab him, Malfoy's inner strength emerged. He blurted out his confession in excitement, but now he regretted it. If given another chance, he might have chosen differently. I didn't expect that you guys, who have just entered school, have learned what unity is. This really surprises me, Anduin said, his serious expression softening into a smile. Don't worry, you don't have to be so cautious. I won't punish you for just going out at night. After all, I did the same thing when I was in school. But wandering around at night without any protective measures is indeed a bit reckless. Seeing Anduin's change in demeanor, everyone's expressions relaxed. They had thought they were in serious trouble, but they didn't expect such a stern professor to be so lenient, even about violating school rules. Professor, you have done things like night tours before? But I heard from senior students that you have always been a role model for the whole school when you were in school, excelling in both academics and discipline, Hermione said, relieved to be exempted from punishment, but curious about Anduin's explanation. Hermione and the others had heard many rumors about Anduin since they entered school. She had actually taken this professor as a role model for her efforts, but, in the end, he heard the other party admit that he had violated the school rules. The school's ban is used to restrain those who have no self-control and to protect the weak, Anduin said, smiling at the crowd as if entertaining friends. As long as you understand what restraint is, you can control your own strength. Night outings are just trivial things. Remember, breaking discipline is not the problem. Getting caught is the problem. Have you ever done other things that violated school rules? B4. Ron, feeling irritated by Anduin's rebellious remarks and emboldened by their good relationship, asked with a grin. I violated the school rules. Anduin seemed to recall a memory, pondering for a moment. Strictly speaking, in the 7 years I was in school, there wasn't a single year in which I didn't break the rules. Every year? Harry looked at him in surprise. Yes, the most serious time was when I went deep into the Forbidden Forest alone in the 4th grade and stayed there for a day and a night, Anduin said, thinking of Hog and suddenly laughing to himself. The Forbidden Forest, isn't it a dangerous, restricted area? Malfoy asked, having heard all kinds of legends about the place. It is indeed dangerous, Anduin admitted. Even for an adult wizard, going deep into the forest could be life-threatening. I killed more than a dozen werewolves in there. With your current level, don't even think about it. Killed a dozen werewolves? The 5 young wizards were dumbfounded. They didn't even know what werewolves were exactly, but the name alone sounded dangerous. Killing them seemed even more frightening, especially for 4th graders who probably wouldn't dare to kill a chicken. Let's not dwell on that. Always remembering the past makes me feel old, Anduin said with a smile, looking at the group. Tell me, what are you doing at the dock at night? No one was caught, which can only be considered good luck. I don't believe you just wanted to chat with Leona because you had nothing better to do. This. When Anduin asked, the group looked at each other in embarrassment, not wanting to admit the truth. After a moment, Neville, who was relatively close to Anduin, took the initiative and said frankly, "We heard that Senior Sister Farley of Slytherin got a legendary item from Leona last night, so everyone thought—" "You thought you could get alchemy items by currying favor with Leona," Anduin said, laughing. The thought processes of these young wizards were so strange that he couldn't help but be amused. "Isn't it true?" Malfoy asked, still convinced. "You seem to like calling those alchemy items legendary props," Anduin noted, not answering directly but instead discussing the term. "Those are not ordinary alchemy props. Legendary props are unique, and you can't buy them even if you want to." Malfoy, showing off in front of the creator, said, "People who own legendary props are elites who are unique." "That's not entirely wrong," Anduin nodded. He knew his work had a certain influence among the younger students, but he hadn't realized it was so attractive to them. It seemed he had been a little out of touch with the crowd, he mused to himself. "People who can own legendary props are indeed unique," Malfoy said devoutly. "I see," Anduin said, not wanting to shatter their fantasies. "So, after meeting Leona, did you get the legendary item you've been thinking about?" "Captain Leona is only generous to those she likes. I think we're still a little bit short," Malfoy admitted. Harry didn't directly accuse Anduin of Leona's failure. After all, he was still in her body. But she seems to like Hermione and Neville very much, and they both seem to have been approved by her, but— Harry added hesitantly. "It was just interrupted by me, right?" Anduin interjected, understanding Harry's implication. "I see. It seems that I ruined your good deed." Anduin found that he increasingly enjoyed teasing the younger students. These little ones hadn't yet realized that the so-called legendary items were all his creations. Of course, at least one of the people present had figured it out. "Professor, you actually gave Senior Sister Farley the legendary item she received yesterday, didn't you?" Hermione observed. She noticed that the conversation between Anduin and them felt like he was coaxing a pet, and the truth immediately dawned on her. "Oh, why do you think that?" Anduin asked, preferring to let the students think for themselves rather than preaching to them. No matter how much they pursue legendary items, they can't escape the fact that those items are your creations, and their ownership should be in your hands. Ms. Leona also serves you, so I can't imagine her bypassing your control over those items," Hermione explained, her precociousness and comprehensive thinking evident. "A very astute observation," Anduin nodded in satisfaction. "If this were a class, I might give you extra points, but for now, all I can do is not deduct any points from you." So that legendary item has nothing to do with Leona? Malfoy asked, pursing his lips in frustration, thinking he had uncovered a significant secret. That's correct. Although those alchemical items mean little to me, she can't use them without my consent, Anduin confirmed with a knowing smile. End of this chapter. Chapter 657, The Crazy Battle Axe. Then, are we just wasting time coming here at night? Malfoy shrugged in frustration. How could he have been so naive before? In fact, it wasn't just him. Even Harry and Ron were very frustrated. They should have followed Hermione's advice and stayed in the common room. Instead, they spent a terrifying night without gaining anything at all. A waste of time? Not entirely, Anduin said, noticing the disheartened expressions of the young wizards. He thought it best to give them a glimmer of hope. Oh, do we still have a chance? Several people immediately looked at Anduin with gleaming eyes, especially Malfoy, Harry, and Ron, who were particularly excited. I'll talk about this later, Anduin replied, not giving a direct answer. Since you're here for legendary artifacts, are you interested in admiring my collection? Collection? Do you mean? Harry glanced at the display area behind the floor-to-ceiling windows in the office, looking surprised. That's right. It's rare for me to have visitors, so let me open your eyes. Anduin stood up and led the excited group through the glass door next to the French windows. Upon entering the museum-like area, everyone could see the true extent of the interior. The display area was larger than they had imagined. In front of them was a row of more than a dozen milky white pedestals, each several meters apart, extending into the distance like a neatly arranged milky white forest. It was hard to tell whether these bases were made of stone or wood, but they emitted a faint milky white glow, continuously projecting light upwards. This was why the legendary artifacts in front of them were still radiant in the simulated dark night environment. On the pedestals were alchemy equipment, shining with magical auras. They came in various shapes. Some were weapons and armor resembling ancient equipment, some were uniquely shaped jewelry, and there were even lanterns, crucibles, and shovels. After entering the collection room, Anduin spread his hands generously, signaling everyone to explore at will. He observed them with great interest. The most excited person was naturally Ron, who had been looking forward to owning legendary artifacts. He glanced around in a trance, dazzled by the array of legendary items, and then ran a few steps, seemingly attracted by something, to a pedestal. A 40-centimeter-long double-sided hatchet was placed in front of Ron. The handle and the surface of the axe seemed to be made of metal. The overall shape was robust, and the whole body was dark copper in color, emitting a red-yellow light as if it had been burned through. It's so cool. Ron was immediately captivated by the axe and couldn't help but look at Anduin with tentative eyes. Professor, can I touch it? As long as you can lift it, you can take it off, but this piece of equipment is a bit dangerous. You'd better be careful, Anduin said with a smile, his hands behind his back, but he slowly walked behind Ron, ready to protect him if necessary. Ron was overjoyed and reached out to hold the handle of the axe. After some testing, he found that although the axe was heavy, it was not impossible to lift. Using both hands, he firmly held it. As soon as he lifted the axe, Ron couldn't put it down. The solid feel of the axe, despite its red-hot appearance, didn't bring any burning sensation. He felt a faint connection with the axe, but it seemed certain conditions had to be met to activate its function. This is the Mad Battle Axe, Anduin began to explain. It's too early for you to use it now, Anduin said, taking the axe from Ron. The sturdy Battle Fury axe looked like a plastic toy in Anduin's hands. He casually held the handle and swung it around twice before explaining. The Battle Fury is an offensive weapon. It's sharp and rigid, making its melee damage quite impressive. The handle's structure is similar to that of a wand, allowing the user to cast spells with it. The splash effect attached to it is actually very simple. Battle Fury can convert all single poi and attack spells into cone-shaped range attacks. The specific attack range depends on the swing's arc when casting the spell. Essentially, the wider the swing, the broader the attack area. For example, like this, quickly knock back. With a wave of his hand, Anduin pulled out a slash close to 60 degree and simultaneously cast the Repulse Curse. The blade of the Battle Fury axe flashed, and the repelling curse, originally a single-target spell, transformed into a fan-shaped shockwave. It swept forward with a boom, advancing 5 or 6 meters before stopping. The cone-shaped attack's momentum was astonishing, and the airwaves generated by the magic slash messed up the robes and hair of those nearby. Fortunately, the storage room's pedestals were spaced far apart. Otherwise, the attack might have spread to other display stands. Perhaps the large space between these pedestals was due to Anduin's preference for random testing. Wow! Several people, including Ron, were stunned by the axe's performance. They all looked at the axe in Anduin's hand with awe. Unfortunately, Anduin seemed a bit dissatisfied after the demonstration. Although the Battle Fury axe can turn a single-point spell into an area attack, its shortcomings are also obvious. The spell's power depends on the attack angle. The attack's size will cause a 30%-60% power reduction, meaning it can only deal 40%-70% of the original spell's damage. The attack distance is also shortened, needing to be within 10 meters to be effective. Additionally, the maximum magic power output is capped, so the power value won't exceed 400 points. So my evaluation of it is a toy. Anduin casually put the axe back on the display shelf, showing a tasteless and pitiful expression. Can such an exaggerated, legendary weapon be called a toy? Ron looked at Anduin with a face full of powerless complaints. If you don't like it, give it to me, okay? I'll keep it as a family heirloom. Anduin noticed Ron's expression and flicked his forehead unceremoniously. No matter how tasteless, the Battle Fury is not something you can master now. Let's talk about it after you upgrade to 4. Could it be that as long as I raise my attributes to Tuffall, you'll give me the Battle Fury axe? Ron asked, still looking at Anduin with some reluctance, his eyes filled with longing. Who told you that? The attribute of Host is only the minimum standard for using Battle Fury. But if you wait until the 5th grade to reach, I promise you won't even touch it, Anduin said, giving Ron another flick on the forehead. Ron covered his head in pain, looking at Anduin unwillingly, and then greedily at the Battle Fury. He really liked this domineering piece of equipment. At that moment, Hermione, who was beside them, also approached a display stand, staring obsessively at the item on it. The item that caught Hermione's eye was a cloak with a hood. Its appearance was simple and plain, looking like an ordinary ink-colored cloak. It was soft but elastic to the touch. The material felt somewhat like leather, but it wasn't very heavy. Light blue magical patterns adorned both the inner and outer layers, giving it a mysterious, luxurious, and noble appearance. Hermione gently took off the cloak and tried it on. She regretted that there was no mirror to see how she looked. That's the illusionist cloak, Anduin said, noticing Hermione's actions and pacing to her side. Its special effect is illusion, which can create an exact clone of the user. It's considered a very strategic piece of equipment. Anduin then injected magic power into the cloak, and everyone watched as another Hermione split from her body. Wow! Hermione exclaimed, startled by the appearance of her clone. She circled around it with great interest, even timidly poking it with her finger. It was much more fascinating than looking in a mirror. Your intelligence attribute isn't high enough to control the clone, so it appears rather dull, Anduin explained with a slight smile, observing Hermione's sudden liveliness. The full effect of Ililu, Sion, consumes 30 to 110 ticks of magic power to create a clone with 20 to 100 ticks of magic power. This clone can even replicate the main body's wand, meaning it has the same spell-casting ability. The clone can also transmit senses, making it excellent for combat assistance or reconnaissance. However, its main drawback is its fragility. It can be described as breaking upon touch. So, while it's a very practical piece of equipment, its effectiveness largely depends on the user's combat IQ. It's amazing. Hermione's eyes darted between the clone and Anduin. Initially, she hadn't paid much attention to the so-called legendary props, but using them firsthand immediately captivated her. Knowing when to stop, Hermione played with the illusionist's cloak for a while, before reluctantly taking it off and placing it back on the display stand. Her clone dissipated as soon as she removed the cloak. Seeing the magical props displayed by Anduin, the rest of the group grew even more excited, eagerly shuttling between the various display stands. After a while, Neville found an item he liked, a long sword with a unique shape. End of this chapter. Chapter 658, Meteorite. Neville's attention was drawn to a long sword standing upright on a display stand, its blade facing downward. The sword was carefully wrapped in thick leather, giving it a comfortable appearance. However, the most peculiar aspect of the sword was its blade, which was completely encased in rough rocks. It was unclear whether the actual blade was hidden within the rocks or if the sword itself was made of stone. Compared to the other alchemy equipment around it, this great sword seemed out of place and, frankly, quite ugly. Yet, for reasons Neville couldn't explain, he felt a strong attraction to its simple texture. He found himself staring at it for a long time, and eventually he couldn't resist the urge to stand on tiptoe and reach out to touch the hilt. The moment Neville's fingers made contact, he felt an overwhelming heaviness, as if he were grasping not a piece of equipment, but an entire world. The sword was incredibly heavy. No, it was more than heavy. It seemed fused with the platform beneath it, immovable even with all his strength. The contact surface between the sword and the display stand was only 1 or 2 centimeters, with no additional support. Logically, it shouldn't be this stable. Could it be a fake? Neville looked at Anduin in puzzlement. Anduin approached him slowly and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "What? You like this sword?" Anduin asked, his eyes fixed on Neville as if he had discovered something new. "It doesn't look as gorgeous as the other props." "It seems so," Neville admitted, withdrawing his hand from the hilt and scratching his head in embarrassment. "But it gives me a very solid feeling, and I like that." "I see," Anduin nodded thoughtfully. He then reached out and lightly tapped the stone sword. "All right, now you can hold it." "Really?" Neville looked at Anduin skeptically, but then tried to grab the hilt again. This time, the feeling was entirely different. "It's so light!" Neville exclaimed, lifting the sword effortlessly with one hand. He stared at the stone sword in astonishment. Just moments ago, it had felt as if it were connected to the earth, but now it was as light as an ordinary wooden stick. Despite the drastic change in weight, Neville could still sense a terrifying power within the sword, a heaviness that seemed to clutch at his heart. "Does it have a name?" Neville asked, finding himself increasingly fond of the ugly stone sword. "Yes," Anduin replied lovingly. "Its name is Meteor, and its hidden ability is also called Meteor. However, I can't demonstrate its function to you now. The current venue cannot withstand Meteor's destructive power." "It's strong?" Neville inferred from Anduin's words. When demonstrating the other 2 pieces of equipment, Anduin had not hesitated. "Indeed," Anduin confirmed. "I can only say that Meteor is a formidable sword that can pose a threat to me. However, it's not something you can handle just yet. The minimum standards for using Meteor are a physique, strength, and agility of at least Tesla, and an intelligence of at least Maw. Without these, you won't be able to control it, and you might even injure yourself. After all, this is a sword that can manipulate gravity." Gravity? Neville, who had grown up in a wizarding family, had little understanding of this physical term. He muttered the word in confusion before returning Meteor to Anduin. "Come on, Neville," Anduin said gently. "I've been looking for a master worthy of Meteor. As long as you can meet the minimum standards for using it, I'll let you try it." Anduin's tone was much gentler with Neville than it had been with Ron, showing a special kind of care. Anduin knew Neville's nature well. Compared to Ron, who was somewhat impulsive, Neville harbored a hidden low self-esteem. Therefore, Neville needed more encouragement, while Ron required a firmer hand. After leaving the meteor booth, Anduin noticed that Malfoy had found his favorite prop. It was a scepter with a rather special shape, quite the opposite of the unpretending Aus meteor. This scepter was truly extravagant. The scepter was about 1 meter long with a short handle. Its milky white surface was adorned with fine golden lines, giving it a luxurious appearance that even seemed to shine. At the top of the scepter were 3 back-to-back angels in armor, and in the middle of their heads was a golden orb. This orb emitted a warm light, resembling a small sun. The entire scepter, made of gold and white, exuded a holy and noble aura, making anyone who looked at it feel a sense of warmth. Malfoy had already taken the scepter from the booth. He first stroked it fondly, then struck a very pretentious pose. Surprisingly, This exaggerated scepter suited the blonde-haired Malfoy quite well, enhancing his overall demeanor. Professor, this item is so handsome. It must be the most powerful legendary item in your collection, right? Malfoy asked eagerly, looking at Anduin with hopeful eyes. It's okay, Anduin replied, unable to meet Malfoy's enthusiastic gaze. He couldn't bring himself to tell Malfoy that this scepter was actually an imitation of a sacred artifact he owned. He had 7 or 8 different versions of it, none of which he would miss if lost. Just okay? Malfoy was clearly dissatisfied with Anduin's response, but he continued to gaze lovingly at the scepter. After a moment, he asked, "By the way, what's the name of this scepter? It must have a cool name, right?" "It's called Wand," Anduin said, making up a name on the spot to avoid Malfoy's greasy eyes. In truth, this scepter didn't even have a name before. Nearly half of the equipment in Anduin's collection room lacked names, as most were experimental products he made on a whim. These items were either for developing new products for Silver Flash Trading Company or for his own research interests. Naming each one seemed too troublesome. "Wow! The Angel's Wand! It sounds very powerful," Malfoy exclaimed, stroking the scepter energetically. "It must be very powerful, right?" Strictly speaking, it doesn't have much power. It's actually an auxiliary piece of equipment," Anduin explained, feeling Malfoy's enthusiasm but unable to lie about its capabilities. "Auxiliary equipment?" Malfoy asked, puzzled. "That's right. The main abilities of the Angel's Wand are purification and healing," Anduin continued, fulfilling his duties as a professor. The purification ability removes negative statuses from the target, such as curses, petrification, and freezing. However, its effectiveness depends on the caster's ability and the strength of the negative effects. For particularly stubborn negative states, even the Angel's Wand may not completely remove them. Healing is simpler. It's similar to a recovery spell like Restore to Original, but it only works on living things. It can also treat some diseases, Anduin added. If you really want to talk a power, Anduin paused to think, the material used to make the Angel's Wand is quite good, so it's actually very sturdy. It's strong enough to be used as a blunt weapon if needed. In addition, the purification and healing magic it casts are pure positive energy, which can effectively harm dark magic creatures with negative energy, such as living corpses. Therefore, the Angel Staff is an alternative nemesis to dark forces. "So the Angel Rod is actually a legendary medical item?" Malfoy asked, looking a bit disappointed after hearing Anduin's explanation. However, he was quite taken with the appearance of the scepter and tried to console himself. "Being called the Dark Buster is still impressive. At least I won't have to fear dark creatures." "It's effective against dark creatures with strong negative energy," Anduin corrected. "It doesn't have any killing effect on black magic creatures like werewolves, hags, and trolls. In fact, it might even benefit them positively." "Ah, then isn't it useless?" Malfoy pouted, feeling a bit unwilling. He had been envious of the Battle Fury axe that Anduin had shown Ron, longing for similar offensive equipment. How can it be useless? Equipment with healing effects is very rare. Don't think that only powerful offensive equipment is valuable. I know of a similar item that can be called a holy weapon. It can heal hundreds of people simultaneously, and when used on a single person, can even make them temporarily immortal, Anduin said, recalling something interesting. He had witnessed the power of that sacred artifact before and had considered imitating it. "That's incredible!" Malfoy exclaimed, his eyes lighting up as he stared at the Angel's Staff in his hand with renewed admiration. "No matter how amazing it is, it has nothing to do with who you are now," Anduin said, worried that Malfoy might drool on the scepter. He quickly snatched it away. End of this chapter. Chapter 659, Thor's Hammer. If you want to use the Angel Rod, you need to have at least an intelligence attribute of Phos. I'm afraid you have to work hard. It's not yours yet, Anduin said bluntly, showing no mercy as he swung the scepter back to the display stand. After Anduin's straightforward remark, Malfoy finally realized that the scepter he was holding was actually someone else's prized collection. "Oh, I got carried away," Malfoy admitted, scratching his head in embarrassment and disappointment. He had never seen such a beautiful artifact like the Angel's Staff, which had momentarily clouded his judgment. Anduin, however, was not one to indulge Malfoy's whims. He turned his attention to Harry, who had been exploring the collection room and had now stopped in front of another display stand. The alchemy equipment that caught Harry's eye was also a weapon. Anduin noticed that these boys seemed to have a particular fondness for weapons, whether they were axes, long swords, or scepters. The weapon Harry was interested in was a metal hammer, about 30 centimeters long. The handle was of moderate thickness, and the hammerhead was a polished, smooth cuboid. Faint blue magical patterns adorned the sides of the hammerhead, occasionally emitting sudden bursts of electric arcs. Upon seeing the sledgehammer, Harry immediately thought of the shining on his body. He sensed a faint connection between the two, which piqued his interest. He couldn't help but reach out to touch it, though he hesitated when he saw the arcs of electricity emanating from the hammer. "If you want to touch it, go ahead," Anduin encouraged. "It won't cause fatal harm when it's not activated. However, if someone who hasn't been approved by it touches it, they might get a bit of a shock." "Yes, thank you, Professor," Harry replied. Encouraged by Anduin, he boldly reached out, tentatively grasping the hammer handle. As Harry's hand approached the hammer, a layer of plasma suddenly seeped out, enveloping the entire hammer. Some of the plasma even touched his hand. Startled by the sudden change, Harry soon realized that the thick plasma didn't harm him. Instead, it playfully clung to his hands and eventually attached his hand to the hammer handle. "Oh?" Anduin raised an eyebrow in surprise. He hadn't expected the highly selective Wild Thunder to accept Harry. This was rare. It seemed that Harry, like himself, had a strong affinity for the element of thunder and lightning. Harry, still puzzled by the incident, recalled that Professor Wilson had mentioned the possibility of being attacked. Yet he felt no discomfort. Shaking his head in confusion, he lifted the sledgehammer off the display stand and examined it closely. "Congratulations, it seems that Thor's hammer has recognized you," Anduin said, patting Harry's head with a smile. This was the first time he had direct contact with the son of his old friend after so many years. "Is it called Thor's hammer? The lightning it emits looks intimidating, but it doesn't seem to repel me," Harry observed, watching the plasma spread over his hands. Apart from a slight numbness, he felt no discomfort. "Yes, the thunderbolt on Thor's hammer is very selective. If it doesn't recognize someone, they can't even touch it, let alone lift it. It seems you have a good rapport with it," Anduin explained with a gentle smile. This was another pleasant surprise, following Neville's earlier success. "Very selective? Do legendary items have their own personalities?" Harry asked, his understanding of alchemy items still quite limited. He looked up at Anduin in confusion. "The lightning on it is very picky." Anduin took Thor's hammer from Harry with a smile and explained in detail, "This is the second one I have made after years of trying to perfectly activate the Wild Thunder equipment. It holds a very special meaning to me." The special thunder and lightning contained in Thor's hammer are more volatile than ordinary thunder and have higher requirements for users. Besides its lethality, which far surpass, says other elemental runes, Wild Thunder also possesses two extreme powers, annihilation and vitality. The former has unparalleled destructive power, while the latter can strengthen the user. Anduin's familiarity with and research on Wild Thunder have been ongoing since he first obtained it. It is precisely because of the blessing of Wild Thunder that he has gained such formidable combat power and physical fitness. Over the years, Anduin has not found another wizard besides himself who can use Wild Thunder normally. As a primitive rune, it is even more unruly than Fiendfire. So it was a surprise to see that Wild Thunder could accept Harry, but the equipment, Thor's hammer, was not that important. "So Wild Thunder is the special function of Thor's hammer?" Harry asked, still half understanding Anduin's explanation. He had seen that the equipment selected by others had various magical properties, so he took it for granted. "No, Wild Thunder is just a special rune. You can regard it as some kind of powerful magic," Anduin clarified kindly. "And this Thor's hammer, in addition to being able to drive Wild Thunder to a certain extent, also has several other very practical functions. For example, the attached long-range magic Lightning Thunder." Anduin raised Thor's hammer high in his hand. The body of the hammer shone with a light blue magical aura, and then a thick lightning bolt appeared out of thin air, striking heavily in an open space about 20 meters away. The sound and vibration startled everyone. And back to nothing, with its own flying curse effect. After saying this, Anduin threw the thunder hammer in a certain direction. Quake's hammer turned into a thunderbolt and blasted out with terrifying power. After a while, Anduin raised his hand again, and the thunder hammer flew back along the original path, landing accurately in his hand. Wow! After seeing this, not only Harry but the others couldn't help but admire in unison. This thunder hammer was too impressive. This is only a part of its functions. It has many wonderful uses in actual combat, but the space here is limited, so I can't demonstrate them all to you, Anduin said with a smile, lightly tossing the thunder hammer before placing it back on the display stand. Although it doesn't exclude you, using Thor's hammer is still too much for you now. At least you must have Spock physique and strength, and Pork intelligence to use it normally. Anduin rubbed Harry's hair with a smile. Then he took the group to visit the collection room, explaining several other alchemy props to them. For example, the scuba lung, which allows people to breathe normally underwater and cast spells, and will be mass-produced and distributed to the Auror troops. The assault breastplate, which can fully strengthen a wizard's physical functions after wearing it. The Medusa shield, which can emit petrifying light, and other magical alchemy props dazzled Harry and the other young wizards, giving them a new definition of legendary props. How about it? Do you like these gadgets? After leading the crowd around, Anduin looked at them with a smile. I like it. I like it so much, Ron exclaimed, the most excited of the group, wishing he could immediately take all these legendary props for himself. Props are not just gadgets. They are works of art. Hermione exclaimed, her excitement palpable. This was a stark contrast to her usual demeanor. The others couldn't help but nod in agreement, their eyes filled with anticipation as they looked at Professor Wilson, hoping he would generously allow them to use the props. It's not enough to simply like them, Anduin said, his expression serious. I can grant you permission to use these props, but there are conditions. What conditions? The group exchanged nervous glances, their eagerness to use the props making it hard to consider giving up. If you want to use them, you must meet two basic conditions, Anduin explained, holding up 2 fingers. First, you must meet the minimum usage standa, RDS, for these items. The items you are most interested in require you to have basic attributes of at least once. Typically, you would need to be in at least the 5th grade to meet these standards. So if you want to use them sooner, you need to work hard. Secondly, I will only open the collection to the best students under my tutelage, Anduin continued with a slight smile. The reason Farley can use my props is that she has proven herself to be exceptional. She is currently an intern at Silver Flash Trading Company, and those props are actually an employee benefit. He added this last part in his mind, deciding not to share it with everyone. Then, how do we prove ourselves? Hermione asked eagerly, undeterred by the challenge. Well, Anduin paused for a moment before continuing. I plan to open a tactical club in a month. I will select students who meet my criteria to join. Those who are chosen will receive advanced tactical training and will be recognized by me. What are your criteria for joining the tactical club? Hermione pressed on, her enthusiasm undiminished. End of this chapter. Chapter 660. Anduin's Symptoms. The so-called standard is actually very simple. The main reference is your personal attributes and spell levels. I don't care whether your previous basic attributes are high or low. What I want is progress. Anduin declared sternly. Only if you are ahead of others in terms of growth rate can you prove your hard work and dedication to me. I don't like lazy students. If you want to get more, you have to pay more. To put it bluntly, his training theory is a subject that trades time for ability. The harder you work, the better the effect. He hopes to use the temptation of alchemy props to increase the learning motivation of these children. No problem. After hearing Anduin's request, Ron and Malfoy shouted in unison. After shouting, they glared at each other competitively. The other 3 didn't hesitate much and immediately nodded excitedly. They all felt that Anduin's conditions were reasonable. Especially Harry, who was initially disappointed when he heard that Anduin was going to test his attributes. After all, his basic attributes were outrageously low. But upon learning that Anduin was looking at the growth value, he immediately cheered up. He felt that he still had a chance. A poor foundation also means there is a lot of room for improvement. After just this week, he felt his physical fitness had improved significantly. So Harry, like the others, secretly resolved to make good use of the less than a month left to improve themselves. What they didn't know was that some of them were already within the default range. Anduin was not a pedantic person who insisted on absolute fairness. Naturally, those who had a good relationship with him would be taken care of. Those who had a bad relationship would face more challenges, and those who had a grudge against him would be dealt with harshly. This was Anduin's style. But now, Anduin maintained a serious expression. Since that's the case, I look forward to your next performance. In a month's time, I will launch a selection for the Tactical Club for students in grades 1 to 5. At that time, I will conduct a separate physical examination. If you are really interested, work hard. Several young wizards nodded in response after Anduin spoke, and then they were sent out of the Leona. Watching the 5 gradually walk away, Anduin stood on the deck, stroking his chin thoughtfully. It was a bit unexpected that he ran into them today, but the result was not bad. It can be seen that you care about these children. Leona's voice suddenly came from next to his ears. The ghostly female captain emerged from below the deck, a teasing smile on her face. After all, they are descendants of friends, so they can't be treated like strangers, Anduin responded lightly without turning his head. Then, why don't you just point it out to them? Especially the boy with the scar on his head. You seem to be paying close attention to him, Leona said, looking at the few little wizards who were still chattering on the road, a puzzled expression on her face. It's not the time yet. Young people's minds are very complicated, especially at their current age. It's better to let them focus on training. I'm not their real father. It's enough to urge them to move forward. Anduin explained. He then glanced at Leona. Does being in contact with them make you recall some of the emotions you used to have as a living person? I can still feel your clumsy performance now. A big sister with a bad personality must be very tiring. Perhaps. Some. At least it's better than wandering around with a cold-blooded animal like you. Leona, who had been winking, didn't bother to practice after being exposed by Anduin. Her expression gradually changed as she sighed. Leona's expression became indifferent. However, she paused and then looked at Anduin. I'm afraid your concern for them isn't entirely pure. Are you worried about becoming like me, a person who has lost their emotions? Someone who can only act on instinct and memory? I don't know. Anduin shook his head. Hi, its expression slightly lonely. The human emotional world is vast and complex. I don't even have the confidence to fully understand it, but at least now I have an excellent subject to observe. You mean, that scar-headed kid, Harry Potter? Leona found herself aligning more with Anduin's line of thinking. That's right. Anduin didn't deny it. I noticed it the first time I met him. He has a special aura. It's kind of like magic, but not quite the same. I guess it should be as Dumbledore said, the protective spell of love that Lily cast. Magic that takes emotion as its core is truly amazing. In fact, Anduin had noticed early on that his emotions had become increasingly indifferent over the past 2 years. He felt less and less like a person. This change had always worried him, even causing a vague sense of fear. After returning to Hogwarts, he found that his symptoms were alleviated when he interacted with these emotional young wizards. Among them was Harry. The protective spell of love on him made Anduin recall his thirst for knowledge in chasing the mysteries of magic and his desire for strong emotional fluctuations. Then, if you discover anything, don't forget about me. Leona's expression suddenly became more animated. It would be great if you could invent some new magic that makes people feel emotions, even if it's sadness. I haven't experienced sadness for a long time. Instead of relying on such intangible things, you might as well try to change your environment. Anduin raised his finger and pointed to Hogwarts not far away. There are many ghosts in there, even Peeves. Maybe you'll gain something after contacting beings in a similar state to you. Anyway, your range of movement isn't just confined to the boat. Other ghosts? Leona stared blankly at the castle in the dark, lost in thought. Maybe that's a good idea, but right now, I just want to sleep in. She stretched lazily. If you don't have any urgent matters tomorrow, don't call me. I'd better learn to be lazy before I learn how to feel. With that, she sank directly into the hull beneath her feet. Seeing this, Anduin could only shake his head speechlessly. He then called softly, "Shalter." As soon as Anduin finished speaking, a black shadow fell from the watchtower of the sailing ship. When it got close, he realized it was a bat covered in pitch black. It turned out that Shalter had been staying on board the whole time. "My lord!" Shalter transformed into her human form the moment she landed, then stood behind Anduin with a smile. "Has the first copy been dealt with? These brats really don't know what they're doing, running into the restricted area at night." Anduin turned his head and glanced at Shalter. "Don't worry, my lord. Except for Lu Wei, who was a little irritable from being woken up, there is nothing unusual in the first copy. But the big dog's saliva is really disgusting. I wasted a long time just cleaning the floor." Shalter reported briefly, her tone carrying a hint of complaint. "If you ask me, you shouldn't have given the three-headed dog to Hagrid back then. Look how he's raised Lu Wei. He's much bigger now compared to other three-headed dogs of the same age. I didn't expect Hagrid to feed Lu Wei so well. I almost didn't recognize him when I saw him again." Anduin shook his head helplessly. "But once the first copy is built, you won't have to run back and forth. I'll add an automatic cleaning function. Since the first instance, why don't you just seal that room, pretend it's a restricted area, and block the door with a confusion spell? It seems like a better way," Shalter suggested, looking at Anduin with some puzzlement. "It's there for people to break into," Anduin replied, narrowing his eyes slightly. "Dumbledore seems to have noticed something. The attack at Gringotts before the start of school was very likely aimed at the Philosopher's Stone. Even with the upgraded security system, the intruder still managed to get through. So he thinks that Voldemort may have sneaked into Hogwarts, but it's still impossible to determine how or where he is," Shalter said, nodding in sudden realization. "Then he asked you to build the #1 dungeon, saying it was to store the Sorcerer's Stone, but it was actually a trap to lure Voldemort?" "That's right. I can't make it too difficult. Otherwise, I could just put a dragon on the first floor. But that would be too simple and too obvious." "Dumbledore is always giving people problems," Anduin said, shaking his head in dissatisfaction. "But according to your design drawings, it seems that there will be more than just this use in the future." "My lord, you seem to be planning something else," Shalter said, squinting at Anduin suspiciously. She knew there was more to it than met the eye. "Do you think I would do this for free?" Anduin rolled his eyes at Shalter. "Since Dumbledore is willing to provide the materials, we might as well make the most of it. Why waste a channel that can only be used once?" "Indeed," Shalter agreed with Anduin's point of view. "Should we be more ruthless and extract the cost of building the second dungeon as well?" "Do you think I'm an idiot?" Anduin glanced at her, clearly dissatisfied. "I've been planning this for a long time. By the time the first dungeon is completed, the material costs for the second one will probably be covered." End of this chapter.